You know what's interesting? Right now, in this very moment, there's probably someone in your life you're blaming for something. Maybe it's your parents for how they raised you. Maybe it's your ex for breaking your heart. Maybe it's your boss for not seeing your value. Maybe it's that friend who betrayed you. Maybe it's God or the universe for dealing you a bad hand. And here's what I want you to consider, not as judgment, but as genuine curiosity. What if that blame, that pointing of the finger, that story you keep telling yourself about how they wronged you, what if that's the very thing keeping you stuck? What if the person you need to free isn't them, but you? What if you've been carrying a key to your own prison this whole time and didn't even know it? I'm not here to tell you that people haven't hurt you. I'm not here to minimize your pain or gaslight you into thinking your struggles aren't real. What I'm here to tell you is something far more interesting and far more empowering. I'm here to tell you that as long as you're blaming someone else for why your life isn't working, you are fundamentally giving them power over your happiness, your peace, your future. You're making them the author of your story. And the beautiful, terrifying truth is this: you can take that power back right now. Not through confrontation, not through getting them to admit they were wrong, not through revenge or justice or finally making them see, but through one simple shift in how you see what happened. This isn't easy work. In fact, it might be the hardest work you ever do, because blame feels good. It feels righteous. It feels like truth. It organizes our pain into a story that makes sense. I'm suffering because of what they did. And that story, as painful as it is, gives us something to hold on to. It gives us an identity. It gives us a reason. It lets us off the hook. But here's what I've learned through my own journey and through sitting with thousands of people in their pain, that story, that blame, that righteousness. It's a cage disguised as a shield. You think it's protecting you, but really, it's keeping you small. It's keeping you stuck in the past. It's keeping you from the life that's waiting for you on the other side of forgiveness, on the other side of responsibility, on the other side of freedom. So today, I want to take you on a journey, a deep journey. Not a quick fix, not a simple trick, but a genuine exploration of what blame is, why we do it, how it's keeping us trapped, and most importantly, how to stop, how to make that one short move from victim to author, from prisoner to free person, from someone whose happiness depends on what others did or didn't do, to someone who owns their story completely. This is going to take time. It's going to require you to look at things you maybe don't want to look at. It's going to challenge beliefs you've held for years, maybe your whole life. But if you stay with me, if you really stay with me, I promise you this: by the end of this journey, you will see yourself, your past, and your future in a completely different way. You will have the tools to stop blaming and start living. You will understand that freedom isn't something you find out there by changing other people or waiting for apologies. It's something you claim right here, right now, by changing how you relate to everything that's ever happened to you. Before we start, if you genuinely enjoy these videos, consider subscribing to our channel and comment what city and time you're watching from. I'm really curious where everyone is tuning in from. It helps me know this work is reaching people who need it. And honestly, it just feels good to know we're in this together. Spread out across the world, but connected by this shared desire to live more freely, more authentically, more powerfully. Now, let me tell you what you're going to get from this deep dive, because I want you to understand the value of the time you're about to invest. First, you're going to understand the real psychology of blame, not the surface level stuff, but the deep unconscious patterns that make us reach for blame like an addict reaches for a drug. You're going to see how blame is actually a defense mechanism, a way of protecting yourself from something even more uncomfortable than anger at someone else. And once you see this, Once you really see it, blame starts to lose its grip on you automatically. Second, you're going to learn the profound difference between responsibility and blame. Most people think these are the same thing, or at least close cousins. They're not. Blame looks backward and says, "Whose fault is this?" Responsibility looks forward and says, "What can I do about this?" Blame keeps you stuck in the past. Responsibility sets you free to create your future. And this distinction, this simple shift in orientation, it changes everything. It's the difference between being a victim of your story and being the author of it. Third, I'm going to share personal stories, my own journey from chronic blamer to someone who has genuinely, not perfectly, but genuinely taken responsibility for my life. And I'm going to share stories of others who have walked this path. Because transformation isn't theoretical. It's not abstract. It happens in real lives, in real moments, through real choices. And when you hear these stories, you'll start to see yourself in them. You'll start to see that if these ordinary people could make this shift, so can you. Fourth, we're going to go deep into 8 core lessons about personal responsibility. These aren't platitudes. These aren't bumper sticker wisdom. These are hard-won insights about how to actually live as a free person in a world that's constantly inviting you to play victim. How to own your reactions. How to stop expecting others to change. How to find the gift in your worst moments. How to forgive without condoning. How to set boundaries without blame. How to grieve what was while still creating what can be. This is the philosophical and psychological meat of this journey, and it's where the real transformation happens. And finally, you're going to get practical, actionable practices you can start using today, not someday when you feel ready. Today, simple practices that interrupt the blame pattern and build the responsibility muscle. Daily habits that, over time, completely rewire how you relate to difficulty, to other people, to your own past. Because knowledge without practice is just entertainment. You need both. You need to understand the why and the how, and I'm going to give you both. Here's what I know about you, even though we've never met. You're tired. You're tired of feeling powerless. You're tired of replaying the same old grievances. You're tired of waiting for someone to change, to apologize, to finally give you what you needed. You're tired of your own story, the one where you're the victim and they're the villain. Maybe you feel guilty for feeling this way. Maybe you think you should be over it by now. Maybe you're ashamed that you can't seem to let it go. And maybe, just maybe, a part of you knows that the way out isn't through them, it's through you. That's why you're here. That part of you that knows, that's the part I'm speaking to right now. The common belief is that if someone hurt you, they need to fix it. They need to apologize. They need to make it right. And until they do, you're justified in your pain, your anger, your stuckness. This belief feels so obvious, so self-evident, that questioning it almost seems cruel. But here's what nobody tells you: that belief is the prison. Not what they did, not what happened, but the belief that your freedom depends on their actions. Because here's the thing, you can't control them. You never could. They might never apologize. They might never change. They might never even think they did anything wrong. And if your happiness, your peace, your ability to move forward depends on them, you're giving them power they don't deserve, and you're guaranteeing your own suffering. What I'm offering you is different. I'm offering you the radical idea that you can be free regardless of what they do. That you can take full responsibility for your life, your happiness, your choices moving forward without them ever changing at all. This isn't about letting them off the hook. This is about taking yourself off the hook. This is about recognizing that as long as you're focused on what they did wrong, you're not focused on what you can do right. As long as you're waiting for their apology, you're not living your life. As long as you're blaming them, you're giving them power. And here's the paradox. The beautiful paradox: when you stop blaming them, when you take full responsibility for your response to what happened, you actually become more powerful, not less. You become the author of your story, not a character in theirs. You stop being at the mercy of whether they change and start being in control of whether you grow. You stop needing them to be different and start being able to be different yourself. This is the shift. This is the one short move. From "they did this to me" to "this happened, and I choose how I respond." Now, I know what some of you are thinking. This sounds like blame the victim. This sounds like you're saying it's my fault. This sounds like you're minimizing real harm, real trauma, real injustice. So let me be crystal clear. I am not saying what happened to you was okay. I am not saying you caused it. I am not saying you deserved it. I am not saying you should just get over it. What I am saying is that there's a difference between what happened to you and what you do with what happened to you. The first is their responsibility. The second is yours. And confusing these two things, making their wrong into your excuse, that's what keeps you trapped. This video is for anyone who's ever felt stuck in resentment. For anyone who's ever noticed they can't seem to move forward because they're too busy looking backward. For anyone who's ever caught themselves telling the same story about how someone wronged them and feeling that familiar cocktail of righteousness and powerlessness. For anyone who's tired of being a victim and ready to be a creator. For anyone who wants to stop giving their power away and start living as the fully responsible, fully empowered, fully free person they were always meant to be. My approach is going to be different from what you might have heard before. I'm not going to tell you to just forgive and forget. I'm not going to give you some spiritual bypass that pretends pain isn't real. I'm not going to offer you a quick fix or a simple formula. What I'm going to do is walk with you through the deepest, most honest exploration of blame and responsibility you've probably ever encountered. We're going to look at the psychology, the philosophy, the practical reality. We're going to explore this from every angle until you can see it so clearly that the old pattern simply falls away. Not because you forced it, but because you outgrew it. I've spent decades studying human behavior, sitting with people in their pain, and most importantly, doing my own inner work around this exact issue. I've been the blamer. I've been the victim. I've been the one who couldn't let go, who couldn't move on, who made my past into a prison. And I've also been the person who found a way out. Not through denial, not through pretending it didn't matter, but through genuine transformation. Through learning to take responsibility not for what happened to me, but for what I did with what happened to me. And that's what I want to share with you today. Not theory, not philosophy, but lived wisdom. The kind of wisdom that only comes from walking the path yourself. Here's what makes this work powerful. It's not about them anymore. It's about you. It's not about proving you're right. It's about being free. It's not about getting justice. It's about getting your life back. And the moment you make that shift, the moment you stop caring more about being right than about being free, everything changes. The energy you were spending on blame becomes available for creation. The attention you were giving to the past becomes available for the present. The identity you built around being wronged becomes available to evolve into something bigger, something more powerful, something more true. So here's the contrast. I want you to hold on one side. There's the path of blame. It's familiar. It's justified. It feels righteous. But it leads to stuckness, to repetition, to a life spent waiting for someone else to change so you can finally be happy. On the other side, there's the path of responsibility. It's uncomfortable. It requires you to let go of being right. It demands that you own your response to life completely. But it leads to freedom, to power, to a life where you're the author, not a character waiting for someone else to write your happy ending. Most people choose the first path without even knowing there's a second one. They spend their whole lives on that first path, wondering why nothing changes, why they keep feeling the same way, why they can't seem to move forward. And the tragedy, the real tragedy, is that the second path was always available. The key to the prison was always in their hand. They just didn't know to use it. Today, I'm showing you that key. I'm showing you the door. I can't make you walk through it. That's your choice. And it has to be your choice, but I can show you it's there. I can show you what's on the other side. And I can walk you through exactly how to take that one short move from prisoner to free person. This is going to take 5 hours. Not because I like to hear myself talk, but because real transformation takes time. It takes stories and lessons and practices and integration. It takes looking at the same thing from multiple angles until you finally see it clearly. It takes repetition and deepening and letting the truth sink in, not just intellectually, but emotionally, spiritually, practically. So I'm asking you to commit, not to me, but to yourself, to give yourself these 5 hours, to really show up, to let this work on you. Because if you do, I promise you, your life will be different on the other side. Not perfect, not painless, but free. And freedom, real freedom, is worth everything. Let me tell you about Sarah. She was 43 years old when she came to see me, and she had spent the last 20 years blaming her mother. Her mother had been critical, demanding, impossible to please. Her mother had compared her to her siblings, had made her feel like she was never enough, had damaged her self-esteem in ways that rippled through every relationship she tried to have. And Sarah was right, her mother had done those things. This wasn't in her imagination. This wasn't an overreaction. Her mother had genuinely been hurtful in ways that had consequences. But here's what Sarah couldn't see. She had turned her mother into the reason for everything wrong in her life. Couldn't sustain a romantic relationship? Mom's fault for not modeling healthy love? Struggled with self-worth? Mom's fault for being critical. Couldn't assert herself at work? Mom's fault for making her feel small. And every time Sarah told this story, she felt two things simultaneously: righteous anger and complete powerlessness. Because if Mom was the reason, and Mom wasn't going to change, then Sarah was stuck. Forever. Or at least until her mother had some miraculous transformation or offered the perfect apology, which, let's be honest, was never going to happen. Sarah came to me because she was exhausted. Not physically exhausted, though she was that too. Spiritually exhausted. Exhausted from carrying this story. Exhausted from the weight of resentment. Exhausted from her own sense of powerlessness. She said something I'll never forget. She said, "I feel like I'm a 43-year-old woman still waiting for my mother's approval, still organizing my life around proving her wrong, still giving her so much power. And she's not even trying to have power over me anymore. I'm the one giving it to her. And I don't know how to stop." That's the moment. That's the moment when someone is ready for this work. Not when they stop being angry, not when they pretend it doesn't hurt, but when they realize that their blame, however justified, is keeping them stuck. When they realize they're the ones keeping themselves in prison. When they realize there might be another way. So I asked Sarah a simple question. I said, "What if your mother never changes? What if she never apologizes, never acknowledges what she did, never becomes the mother you needed? Can you still be happy? Can you still be free?" And Sarah started crying. Because she had never asked herself that question. She had always assumed her freedom was on the other side of her mother changing. And for the first time, she was confronting the possibility that she might need to change instead. Over the next months, Sarah and I worked together on one thing, shifting from blame to responsibility. Not responsibility for what her mother did, Responsibility for what she, Sarah, did with what her mother did. Responsibility for her own healing. Responsibility for her own growth. Responsibility for building the self-worth her mother never gave her. And here's what happened. Sarah started to change. Not because her mother changed. Her mother didn't change, but Sarah changed. She stopped waiting for approval and started approving of herself. She stopped organizing her life around proving her mother wrong and started organizing it around what she actually wanted. She stopped letting her mother's voice in her head run the show and started cultivating her own voice. And one day, Sarah told me something that brought tears to my eyes. She said, "I finally feel like an adult. Not a wounded child in an adult body, but an actual adult. Someone who can stand on her own. Someone who doesn't need anyone else to change to be okay. Someone who's responsible for her own life." That's the shift. That's what we're here to learn. Now, let me share my own story, because I'm not coming to you as some enlightened being who's never struggled with this. I'm coming to you as someone who's been deep in the pit of blame and found a way out. When I was in my 20s, I blamed my father for everything. My father was an alcoholic, emotionally unavailable, often angry, sometimes cruel. He wasn't there when I needed him. He didn't protect me. He didn't guide me. He didn't give me what a father is supposed to give his son. And I spent years, I mean years, angry at him, resentful, building my identity around being the son of a failed father. Every time something went wrong in my life, I had an explanation. Well, I didn't have a father who taught me that. I didn't have a father who believed in me. I didn't have a father who modeled healthy masculinity. And all of that was true. I didn't have those things. But what I couldn't see at the time was that I was using that truth as an excuse. I was using my father's failures as a reason not to try, not to grow, not to become the man I wanted to be. I was making his weakness into my identity. The turning point came when I was about 30. I was in a men's group, sitting in a circle with other guys, and we were talking about our fathers. Everyone had a story. Everyone had wounds. Everyone had reasons to be angry. And then one guy, I'll call him Tom, said something that changed my life. He said, "You know, I spent 20 years hating my father for who he wasn't. And then one day I realized he was never going to be who I wanted him to be. He didn't have it in him. And as long as I was waiting for him to be different, I was stuck. But the moment I accepted him as he is and took responsibility for becoming the man I wanted to be, regardless of whether he ever changed, I was free. It was like a lightning bolt, because I realized that's exactly what I'd been doing. Waiting for my father to finally show up. Waiting for him to apologize. Waiting for him to see me. And in the waiting, I wasn't living. I wasn't growing. I wasn't becoming. I was stuck in this adolescent rage, this powerless victimhood, giving him so much power over my happiness. So I made a choice, a conscious, deliberate choice. I chose to stop blaming my father, not because what he did was okay, not because I suddenly understood him and everything was fine, but because I realized that my blame was hurting me more than it was hurting him. My blame was keeping me small. My blame was my prison, and I wanted out. That choice, that one choice, it didn't solve everything overnight, but it set me on a completely different path. A path where I was responsible for my own healing, my own growth, my own life. A path where I stopped being a victim of my past and started being the author of my future. And over time, everything changed. My relationship with my father got better, not because he changed. He didn't change that much, but because I changed. I stopped needing him to be different. I stopped waiting for something from him he couldn't give. I released him from the impossible expectation of being the father I never had, and I became the man I wanted to be anyway. That's the journey I want to take you on today. Not my journey specifically, but the universal journey from blame to responsibility, from victimhood to authorship, from prison to freedom. Because here's what I've learned: this isn't just my story or Sarah's story. This is the human story. This is what we all go through. We all get hurt. We all have reasons to blame. We all spend time in that prison. The only question is whether we find the key or not. Whether we make that one short move or stay stuck forever. So let's go deeper. Let's explore this together. Let's look at what blame really is, why we do it, and how to stop. Let's examine the 8 core lessons that will transform how you see yourself and your past. Let's practice the daily habits that build the responsibility muscle. And let's do it together, as fellow travelers on this path. Not as teacher and student, but as human beings trying to live more freely, more powerfully, more authentically. Over the next hours, I'm going to share everything I know about this topic. Stories that will break your heart open, insights that will shift how you see everything, practices that will change your daily life. And through it all, one central message: you are not a victim. You never were. You are powerful beyond measure. You always have been. The only thing standing between you and that power is a story you keep telling yourself about why you can't have it. And today, we're changing that story. Are you ready? I mean really ready. Ready to let go of being right so you can be free? Ready to release the familiar comfort of blame so you can claim the unfamiliar power of responsibility? Ready to stop waiting for someone else to change your life and start changing it yourself? If you are, if you're truly ready, then let's begin. Let's take that one short move together. From blame to freedom, from victim to author, from prison to power. Let me tell you another story, one that might hit even closer to home for some of you. This is about Michael. Michael was 56 when I met him. A successful businessman on paper, nice house, good career, respected in his community. But inside, Michael was dying. He was carrying a resentment so deep, so old, so foundational to his identity that he didn't even realize how much of his life energy was going into maintaining it. When Michael was 12 years old, his best friend betrayed him. They had been inseparable since kindergarten. The kind of friendship that feels like brotherhood. And then one day, out of nowhere, this friend turned on him. Started a rumor that wasn't true, a cruel rumor that spread through their small school like wildfire. Michael became a social pariah overnight. Kids who had been his friends suddenly wouldn't talk to him. He ate lunch alone. He walked home alone. And the friend who started it all? He never apologized, never explained, just moved on like nothing had happened. Now, you might be thinking that's terrible. But it was also 44 years ago. Surely Michael had moved on by then. But here's what I learned: we don't move on from wounds. We build our lives around them. Michael had spent 44 years organizing his entire personality around that betrayal. He didn't trust easily. He kept people at arm's length. He had acquaintances, but no real friends. He tested people constantly, looking for signs they might betray. And when they inevitably failed his impossible tests, when they proved to be human and flawed, he would think, "See, I knew it. People can't be trusted." And he would add another brick to the wall around his heart. Michael came to see me because his wife of 23 years had just left him. She said she couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't live with someone who never let her in. Couldn't keep proving herself to someone who would never trust her. Couldn't be married to a man who was still, after all these years, protecting himself from a 12-year-old boy who betrayed him in 7th grade. And when Michael told me this story, when he finally connected the dots between that moment in 7th grade and the collapse of his marriage, he broke down. Not just crying, but a deep, body-shaking grief, because he suddenly saw what that one unchosen moment, that one betrayal, had cost him. Not just his marriage, but 44 years of connection. 44 years of intimacy. 44 years of the very thing he wanted most, deep friendship sacrificed on the altar of protecting himself from what had already happened. I asked Michael the same question I asked Sarah. I said, "That boy, the one who betrayed you, he's 56 now too, somewhere in the world, probably with no memory of what he did. He's living his life. He's not thinking about you. He's not organizing his days around that moment. But you are. You've given him 44 years of your life. You've let him shape who you are, how you love, who you let in. And here's my question. Do you want to give him the rest of your life too? Or are you ready to take it back?" Michael looked at me with these red, tired eyes and said, "I don't know how. I don't know how to not be the person this made me." And I said, "That's okay. That's why we're here. Not to pretend it didn't happen, not to say it didn't matter, but to take back your power to choose who you become because of it. That's the work we did, together." Not forgiving that 12-year-old boy, Michael wasn't ready for that, and I wasn't going to force it. But releasing the grip that moment had on Michael's present, seeing that he had been letting a 7th grader make his adult decisions, that he had been protecting himself from a danger that was 44 years gone, that he had been so focused on not being hurt again that he had guaranteed his own isolation. Michael started practicing something I taught him. Every time he felt that old suspicion rising, that old voice saying, "Be careful, people betray you," he would pause and ask himself, "Is this person actually betraying me right now? Or am I reacting to something that happened decades ago?" And 9 times out of 10, it was the past. 9 times out of 10, the person in front of him wasn't betraying him at all. They were just being human, making a mistake, having a bad day, being imperfect. But Michael's wound was so sensitive that any imperfection felt like betrayal. Over time, Michael started to change. He started taking risks with trust. Small risks at first, telling someone something personal and not testing them to see if they'd use it against him. Assuming good intent instead of looking for hidden agendas, letting people in, just a little, and noticing that most of the time they didn't hurt him. Most of the time, they were just people, trying their best, carrying their own wounds, wanting connection just like he did. And here's the beautiful part, his wife came back. Not because he begged her, not because he promised to change, but because she saw that he actually had changed. She saw that he had done the work, that he had stopped letting a 12-year-old run his life, that he had reclaimed his power to be present, to be open, to be available for real intimacy. She came back because the man she married, the man she loved, had finally shown up. Michael told me later, "I spent 44 years blaming that kid for ruining my life. But the truth is, he hurt me once. I hurt myself for 44 years. He betrayed me for one moment. I betrayed myself every day by not letting anyone in. He stole my 7th grade year. I stole my whole adult life, and I can't get those years back, but I can stop stealing from myself now. That's the realization I want you to have, not in 44 years, but today, right now. Whatever you're blaming someone for, however justified that blame might be, you're the one paying the price. You're the one carrying it. You're the one letting it shape your present and your future. And you don't have to. You can put it down. You can take your power back. You can stop letting the past run your present. Let me go deeper into Michael's story because I think it illustrates something really important. When Michael first came to see me, he couldn't even see the pattern. He thought his trust issues were just who he was. He thought everyone was like this. He thought being guarded was being wise. He didn't realize he was still living as that 12-year-old boy, still organizing his entire relational world around one betrayal that happened in 7th grade. And here's what's fascinating. Michael had created an entire worldview to justify his pattern. He had evidence that people couldn't be trusted. Because when you expect betrayal, when you test people constantly, when you never fully let anyone in, you create the very conditions that confirm your belief. People who are constantly tested eventually get tired and leave. People who are never fully trusted eventually stop trying to earn that trust. So Michael kept creating situations where people would let him down, and then he'd say, "See, I was right. People can't be trusted." This is what psychologists call a self-fulfilling prophecy. But it's more than that. It's a self-perpetuating prison. Michael was both the prisoner and the guard. He was locking himself in every day, and he thought he was keeping himself safe. He thought his vigilance, his suspicion, his testing, it was protecting him, but it was actually guaranteeing the very thing he feared most, being alone. When we started working together, the first thing we had to do was help Michael see the pattern, because you can't change what you can't see. So we started tracking. Every time Michael felt suspicious of someone, every time he tested someone, every time he pulled back from connection, we noted it. And we asked, is this person actually doing something untrustworthy right now, or is this an old pattern being triggered? And what Michael discovered was shocking to him. 95% of the time, the person wasn't doing anything untrustworthy. They were just being human. They forgot to call when they said they would. They were having a bad day and seemed distant. They made a joke that Michael interpreted as mockery. They canceled plans because something came up, normal human behavior. But Michael's hypervigilant system, his 12-year-old wound, was interpreting all of it as potential betrayal. Once Michael could see this, once he could distinguish between real untrustworthiness and his triggered pattern, he had a choice. He could continue to respond from the wound, or he could respond from his adult self. He could continue to let that 12-year-old run his relationships, or he could step in as the 56-year-old man he actually was and make different choices. And it wasn't easy, because the pattern had been running for 44 years. It was deeply grooved into his nervous system. His body would react before his mind could catch up. Someone would do something that reminded him even slightly of that original betrayal, and his whole system would flood with fear and anger. His heart would race. His stomach would clench. Every fiber of his being would scream, "Protect yourself! Pull back! Don't trust! They're going to hurt you!" But Michael learned to recognize that response, to notice it, to name it. Oh, there's my 12-year-old self, feeling scared. There's that old wound, getting triggered. And then, instead of acting from that place, he would pause. He would breathe. He would ask himself, what does my 56-year-old self know that my 12-year-old self doesn't? And his adult self knew a lot. Knew that not everyone is that 12-year-old boy. Knew that some people are trustworthy. Knew that the only way to have real connection is to take risks with trust. Knew that being alone forever was worse than the possibility of being hurt again. And so Michael started taking small risks, really small at first. He would share something mildly personal with someone and not test them to see if they used it against him. He would make plans with someone and assume they'd show up instead of bracing for them to cancel. He would feel close to someone and stay in that feeling instead of immediately creating distance. Baby steps, tiny risks. But each one was a victory. Each one was choosing his adult self over his wounded self. Each one was taking his power back from that 12-year-old boy who betrayed him. And you know what happened? Most of the time, people responded well. Most of the time, they honored his trust. Most of the time, they showed up. And slowly, gradually, Michael's nervous system started to learn something new, started to update its database, started to realize that not everyone betrays you, that some people are safe, that connection is possible, that he didn't have to live in that prison anymore. But here's the important part. It wasn't the other people who freed Michael. It was Michael who freed Michael. Yes, they responded well, and that helped. But Michael had to take the first step. Michael had to take the risk. Michael had to stop waiting for the world to prove it was safe and start choosing to trust anyway. That was the shift. That was the one short move from victim to author. And when Michael's wife came back, it wasn't just because he'd changed. It was because she saw that he had taken full responsibility for his healing. She saw that he wasn't blaming that 12-year-old boy anymore, wasn't blaming his childhood, wasn't blaming her for not being patient enough with his trust issues. He was owning it. He was doing the work. He was choosing to change, and that's what made reconciliation possible. Not just that he changed, but that he took responsibility for changing himself. This is what I want you to understand. When you take full responsibility for your healing, for your growth, for your patterns, something shifts not just in you, but in your relationships. Because people can feel when you're in victim mode versus when you're in author mode. They can feel when you're blaming versus when you're owning. They can feel when you're waiting for them to fix you versus when you're fixing yourself. And they respond differently, not because they're obligated to, but because it's simply more appealing, more respectful, more adult to engage with someone who's taking full responsibility for themselves. So if you're in a situation like Michael was, if you're organizing your life around an old wound, if you're letting a past betrayal dictate your present relationships, I want you to ask yourself Michael's question. That person who hurt you, they're out there living their life. They're not thinking about you. They're not organizing their days around what they did to you. But you are. You're giving them years, maybe decades, of your life. You're letting them shape who you are, how you love, who you let in. And the question is, do you want to give them the rest of your life too? Or are you ready to take it back? Because you can, right now. You can decide that you're done letting that old wound run your present. You can decide that you're going to learn to trust again, to connect again, to be vulnerable again. Not naively, not without discernment, but openly. From your adult self who knows that the risk of being hurt is worth the reward of real connection. From your powerful self who knows that you can handle being hurt if it happens again because you're not that same person you were when it first happened. From your free self who refuses to let one person's betrayal determine your entire relational life. Now, let me share a different kind of story. This one's about Jennifer. Jennifer was 28, and she had every reason in the world to blame her ex-boyfriend. He had cheated on her, lied about it, gaslit her when she suspected, and then left her for the other woman. It was a classic betrayal story, the kind that makes your blood boil just hearing about it. And Jennifer was stuck in it. Stuck in the story, stuck in the rage, stuck in the obsession with what he did and why he did it and how he could have done it. She would spend hours scrolling through his social media, torturing herself with pictures of him happy with someone else. She would rehearse conversations she would never have, speeches where she told him exactly what he'd done to her, exactly how much he'd hurt her. She would imagine scenarios where he came crawling back, where he realized what he'd lost, where he suffered the way she suffered. And all of this mental and emotional energy was going to him. Still, even though he was gone, even though he'd moved on, even though he probably wasn't thinking about her at all, Jennifer came to see me at the urging of her best friend, who told her, "I love you, but I can't listen to this anymore. It's been 2 years. He's not coming back. He's not going to apologize. And you're destroying yourself, trying to make sense of something that doesn't make sense. Harsh words, but true words. Sometimes we need someone to love us enough to tell us the truth. When Jennifer sat down in my office, the first thing she said was, "I just need to understand why. Why would he do this? What did I do wrong? What didn't I give him?" And I said, "Those are the wrong questions, because they're all about him. They keep you focused on him, trying to understand him, trying to figure out what you could have done differently. And the problem with those questions is they keep you powerless. Because you can't control him. You never could. The only questions that matter are these: who do you want to be now? What do you want to create from here? How are you going to take your life back?" Jennifer looked at me like I'd spoken another language, because she had been so consumed with understanding him that she hadn't thought about herself. She hadn't thought about what she wanted. She hadn't thought about her own agency, her own power, her own life beyond this wound. She had made his betrayal the center of her universe, and in doing so, she had disappeared from her own story. We worked together on a radical shift. Instead of asking why he did it, we asked what she was going to do now. Instead of trying to understand his choices, we focused on her choices. Instead of rehearsing speeches she would never give to him, she started writing letters to herself, letters of compassion, of forgiveness, of encouragement. Instead of stalking his social media, she blocked him completely and started following accounts that inspired her, that helped her grow, that reminded her of who she was before him and who she could be after him. And something amazing started to happen. Jennifer started coming back to life. Not quickly, not easily, but genuinely. She started noticing things again: the taste of her coffee in the morning, the way sunlight came through her window, the sound of her friends' laugh. She started having thoughts that weren't about him. She started making plans that weren't contingent on his return or his apology. She started being present in her own life instead of absent, obsessing about his. One day, about 6 months into our work together, Jennifer came in with this look on her face I hadn't seen before. She looked lighter. She looked free. And she said, "Something weird happened. I saw him yesterday. He was at the coffee shop with her, and I felt nothing. Not rage, not jealousy, not that obsessive need to know what they were talking about. Just nothing. He was just some guy I used to know, and I realized I got my life back." I don't know when it happened exactly, but somewhere along the way, I stopped giving him my life. I stopped making him the main character. I took myself back. That's the shift. That's what happens when you stop blaming and start owning your response. You get yourself back. You get your life back. You get your power back. Not because what they did was okay. Not because the betrayal didn't matter. But because you decided that your future matters more than their past wrong. You decided that being free is more important than being right. You decided to stop giving them rent-free space in your head and your heart. Here's another story, a different angle. This one's about David. David was 61, close to retirement, and he had spent his entire career blaming his boss from 30 years ago. When David was 31, he had been up for a big promotion. He had worked hard for it. He deserved it. Everyone knew he deserved it. And then, at the last minute, his boss gave the promotion to someone else, someone less qualified, someone who happened to be the boss's golfing buddy. David was devastated, and rightfully so. It was unfair. It was nepotism. It was everything that's wrong with corporate culture. But here's what happened: David never got over it. He left that job, which was probably the right choice, but he carried the bitterness with him to the next job, and the next one, and the next one. For 30 years, David had a chip on his shoulder. He was suspicious of bosses. He was cynical about meritocracy. He was always looking for signs that he was being passed over, overlooked, undervalued. And you know what? He found, because when you're looking for evidence that the world is unfair, you'll find it everywhere. David's career was fine. He made a good living, but he never rose to the level he could have. Not because he wasn't talented, but because he was so busy protecting himself from being passed over again that he never fully showed up. He never took risks. He never put himself out there for promotions. He never let himself be vulnerable to disappointment. He had decided, consciously or not, that it was safer to play small than to risk being hurt again. When David came to see me, he was 6 months from retirement, and he was filled with regret. Not just about that one promotion, but about the 30 years he'd spent letting it define him. He said, "I gave that man 30 years of my life. I let him steal my ambition, my joy, my willingness to try. And the crazy thing is, he probably doesn't even remember me. He probably doesn't know my name, but I've been organizing my whole career around what he did to me when I was 31. I asked David the same question I ask everyone. If you could go back, knowing what you know now, what would you tell your 31-year-old self? And David said, without hesitation, I would tell him, let it go. It's unfair. It hurts. But don't carry it. Don't let this one man's unfairness become your identity. Don't spend the next 30 years protecting yourself from a pain you've already felt. Move on. Take risks. Trust again. Because the alternative is wasting your whole life being small to avoid being hurt. That's the wisdom we gain when we finally release blame. We see what it cost us. We see what we gave up to hold on to being right. We see all the years we could have been living that we spent protecting. And the tragedy is, most people don't see this until it's late, until they're David's age, looking back with regret. But you don't have to wait. You can see it now. You can make the choice now. You can decide today that you're not going to give whoever hurt you any more of your life. You're not going to let them steal any more of your joy, your ambition, your openness, your trust. Let me tell you about the psychology of what's happening here, because I think it's important to understand the mechanism. When someone hurts us, our brain does something very clever. It creates a protective story, a story that says, this happened because of them, and if I stay vigilant, if I remember what they did, if I keep my guard up, I can prevent it from happening again. And this story feels like protection. It feels like wisdom. It feels like we're learning from our experience. But here's what's actually happening. We're not protecting ourselves from future pain. We're perpetuating present pain. We're keeping the wound fresh. We're rehearsing the hurt over and over. We're living in the past instead of in the present. And we're building our identity around being the person this happened to. We become, in our own minds, the betrayed one, the passed over one, the hurt one, the wronged one. And that identity, as painful as it is, becomes comfortable. It becomes who we are, and letting it go feels like losing ourselves. This is why blame is so sticky. It's not just about the other person. It's about us. It's about the identity we've built. It's about the story we've been telling ourselves about who we are and why our life is the way it is. And changing that story, letting go of that identity, it feels dangerous. It feels like we're losing the very thing that's been keeping us safe. But we're not. We're losing the thing that's been keeping us stuck. Think about it like this. Imagine you're walking through life carrying a heavy backpack. And in that backpack is every wrong that's ever been done to you. Every betrayal, every hurt, every injustice. And it's heavy. It's so heavy that you're bent over under the weight, but you keep carrying it because you think it's important. You think it's evidence. You think if you put it down, you're letting them off the hook. You're saying it didn't matter. You're being naive, vulnerable, setting yourself up to be hurt again. But here's the truth, that backpack isn't protecting you. It's crushing you. It's weighing you down. It's keeping you from moving forward. It's exhausting you. And the person who hurt you, they're not carrying anything. They've moved on. They're living their life. And you're still carrying their wrong on your back like it's your job, like it's your responsibility, like it's who you are. What I'm inviting you to do is put down the backpack, not because what's in it doesn't matter, not because the hurts weren't real, but because you matter more. Your life matters more. Your freedom matters more. And you can't be free while you're carrying all that weight. You can't move forward while you're bent backward under the burden of blame. I want to share one more story before we move into the lessons. This one's about a woman named Lisa. Lisa was in her mid-40s, and she had been in therapy on and off for 20 years, trying to deal with the trauma of her childhood. Her father had been abusive, not physically, but emotionally and psychologically. He was cruel, dismissive, belittling. He made her feel worthless. He damaged her in ways that took decades to even begin to understand. And Lisa had done everything you're supposed to do. She'd been in therapy. She'd read the books. She'd joined support groups. She'd done the inner child work. She understood her trauma intellectually. She could explain the patterns, the triggers, the wounds, but she wasn't healing. She was understanding her pain, but she was still in pain. She was explaining her stuckness, but she was still stuck. When Lisa came to see me, she was at the end of her rope. She said, "I've been processing this trauma for 20 years. I've spent thousands of dollars and thousands of hours talking about what my father did to me. I understand it completely. But I'm not better. I'm still anxious. I'm still depressed. I'm still unable to have healthy relationships. I'm still that little girl waiting for her father to love her. When does it end? When do I get to be free?" And I asked her a question that stopped her cold. I said, "Lisa, what if understanding your trauma isn't the same as healing from it? What if talking about what he did keeps you focused on him instead of on you? What if processing the past keeps you stuck in the past? What if the way forward isn't to understand him better, but to choose yourself more fully?" Lisa stared at me, and then she started crying. Not sad crying, angry crying. She said, "Are you saying I've wasted 20 years? And I said, "No, but I am saying that maybe it's time for a different approach. Maybe it's time to stop analyzing what he did to you and start deciding who you're going to be despite what he did to you." We shifted Lisa's focus completely. Instead of talking about her father, we talked about her. Instead of processing old wounds, we built new capacities. Instead of understanding her past, we created her future. And it wasn't easy. Lisa had been so identified with being a trauma survivor that choosing a new identity felt terrifying. She didn't know who she was without her wound. She didn't know what to talk about if she wasn't talking about her trauma. She didn't know how to connect with people if she wasn't bonding over shared pain. But slowly, gradually, Lisa started to discover who she was beyond her trauma. She started to see that she wasn't just the daughter of an abusive father. She was a woman with interests, with passions, with gifts, with desires. She was someone who could create, could love, could laugh, could live. And the more she focused on that, on building that, on being that, the less power her father had over her. Not because she forgave him, she didn't, and she didn't have to, but because she stopped making him the center of her story. She stopped organizing her identity around what he did to her and started organizing it around who she wanted to be. Today, Lisa is thriving, not in a fake, toxic positivity way, but in a real, grounded, powerful way. She still has hard days. She still carries scars, but she doesn't live in her wounds anymore. She doesn't introduce herself as a trauma survivor. She doesn't bond with people over shared pain. She builds her life around what she wants to create, not what was done to her. And that shift, that simple but profound shift, changed everything. This is what I want you to understand from these stories. Sarah and her mother, me and my father, Michael and his childhood friend, Jennifer and her ex, David and his boss, Lisa and her trauma. All different stories, all different specific hurts, but all the same underlying pattern: people who had been hurt, people who had every right to blame, people whose blame was completely justified, but people whose blame was keeping them stuck. And all of them made the same choice: to stop blaming and start building, to stop focusing on what was done to them and start focusing on who they wanted to become, to stop waiting for someone else to change and start changing themselves. This isn't about them being extraordinary. This isn't about them being stronger or better than you. This is about them making a choice, a simple choice, a hard choice, but a simple one. The choice to stop giving their power to the person who hurt them. The choice to take responsibility for their response. The choice to be the author of their story instead of a character in someone else's. And here's what I know: if they could make that choice, so can you. Whatever you're blaming someone for right now, however justified that blame is, however much they actually did hurt you, you can make the same choice. You can put down the backpack. You can stop carrying their wrong. You can reclaim your power. You can take your life back. Not someday. Today. Right now. With one short move from "they did this to me" to "this happened, and I choose how I respond." But here's the part almost nobody tells you: letting go of blame doesn't mean what you think it means. Most people think letting go of blame means saying what happened was okay. It means letting the other person off the hook. It means being weak, being a pushover, being naive enough to get hurt again. And because letting go of blame means all those things in their minds, they never do it. They hold on to their blame like it's a sword, like it's protecting them, like letting it go would make them vulnerable. But that's not what letting go of blame means. Not even close. Letting go of blame means you stop making what they did the reason for what you don't do. It means you stop using their wrong as your excuse. It means you stop organizing your life around their failure and start organizing it around your power. It means you free yourself from the prison of waiting for them to change so you can be happy. It means you take full ownership of your life from this moment forward, regardless of what happened before this moment. And here's the beautiful paradox: when you let go of blame, you're not letting them off the hook. You're letting yourself off the hook. You're releasing yourself from the obligation to carry their wrong. You're freeing yourself from the burden of their guilt. You're taking yourself out of the prison where they're the warden and you're the inmate, serving a life sentence for a crime they committed. Think about it: when you blame someone, who's suffering? Not them, you. Who's thinking about it every day? Not them, you. Who's organizing their life around it? Not them, you. Who's unable to move forward? Not them, you. So who's actually in prison here? They did the crime, but you're serving the time. They hurt you once, but you're hurting yourself over and over by holding on to it. They may never even know the impact they had, while you're spending years, decades, your whole life carrying the weight of what they did. This is what I mean when I say blame is a trap. It feels like power. I'm holding them accountable. I'm remembering what they did. I'm not letting them get away with it. But it's not power. It's powerlessness disguised as righteousness. Real power is saying, what you did was wrong, and I'm choosing to live fully anyway. I'm choosing to be happy anyway. I'm choosing to trust anyway. I'm choosing to stay open anyway. Not because what you did was okay, but because my life is more important than your wrong. Let me tell you about another person. This one's going to challenge you. This is Robert. Robert was a combat veteran who had seen and done things in war that haunted him. He came home with severe PTSD, nightmares, flashbacks, rage he couldn't control. And Robert blamed the people who sent him to war. He blamed the politicians. He blamed the generals. He blamed the system that put him in that situation. And he was right to blame them. They were responsible. They made decisions that put young men like Robert in impossible situations. They sent him to war, and then didn't properly support him when he came home broken. But here's what happened. Robert's blame, however justified, was destroying his life. He couldn't hold a job because his anger was always just beneath the surface. He couldn't maintain relationships because he couldn't trust anyone in authority, anyone with power, anyone who might send him into danger again. He couldn't sleep, couldn't relax, couldn't feel safe, and every time someone suggested he needed help, he would say, "I need help. I'm not the problem. They're the problem. The people who sent me there, the people who did this to me. They need to fix this." And he was right. They should fix it. They should have proper support systems for veterans. They should take responsibility for the men and women they send to war. But they weren't fixing. Hey. And while Robert waited for them to fix it, his life was falling apart. His marriage ended. He lost job after job. He was drinking too much. He was isolated, angry, suffering. And all the while, the politicians who sent him to war, they were fine. They were sleeping soundly in their beds while Robert couldn't sleep at all. They had moved on to the next election, the next crisis, the next agenda, while Robert was still stuck in the war that ended years ago. When Robert came to see me, he was at his lowest point. He told me, "I don't know why I'm here. You can't fix what they did to me. Nobody can." And I said, "You're right. I can't fix what they did to you, but I can help you fix what you're doing to yourself." He looked at me like I'd slapped him. He said, "What I'm doing to myself? I'm the victim here." And I said, "You were the victim. Past tense. They victimized you." "That's true. That's not your fault." "But right now, today, you're continuing to victimize yourself by refusing to take responsibility for your healing. You're waiting for them to save you, and they're never going to. So the question is, are you going to wait forever, or are you going to save yourself?" That was hard for Robert to hear, really hard, because it felt like I was blaming him for his suffering. But I wasn't. I was inviting him to see that there's a difference between who caused the wound and who's responsible for the healing. They caused the wound. That's their fault, their responsibility. They're wrong. But the healing, that's his responsibility. Not because that's fair. It's not fair. It's deeply unfair. But it's reality. And he could spend the rest of his life waiting for fairness, or he could start healing now. Robert and I worked together for 2 years. Hard, painful, often frustrating work. Because Robert had to learn something that goes against every instinct we have. He had to learn that taking responsibility for his healing wasn't the same as saying what happened to him was okay. He had to learn that you can acknowledge that something was done to you and still take ownership of your response to it. He had to learn that the people who hurt you don't have to fix you for you to be fixed. And slowly, gradually, Robert started to reclaim his life. Not by forgetting what happened, not by pretending it didn't matter, but by deciding that his future was more important than his past. by deciding that living well was more important than being right about who was to blame, by deciding that he was going to be okay whether or not the people who hurt him ever acknowledged it, ever apologized, ever faced consequences. Today, Robert runs a support group for veterans. He helps other guys who are where he was stuck in rage, stuck in blame, stuck in waiting for someone else to save them. And he tells them what I told him. Nobody's coming to save you. And that's not fair. And it's also not fatal. You can save yourself. You can take responsibility for your healing. You can stop waiting for them to change and start changing yourself. It's the hardest thing you'll ever do. But it's also the only way out. This is the level of responsibility I'm talking about. Not surface level, not just taking responsibility for the things you directly caused, but taking full, complete, radical responsibility for your life, for your healing, for your happiness, for your future. Even when, especially when it's not fair, even when someone else hurts you, even when you're right that they're wrong. Because being right doesn't set you free. Being responsible does. Now, I want to talk about something even more challenging, collective blame, when it's not just one person who hurt you, but a whole system, a whole culture, a whole history of oppression or marginalization or injustice. Because some of you watching this, you're not just carrying individual wounds, you're carrying collective wounds. Wounds from racism, from sexism, from homophobia, from poverty, from violence, from systems that were set up to keep you down. And the question becomes, how do you take personal responsibility in the face of systemic injustice? How do you stop blaming when the blame is correct, is justified, is backed up by hundreds of years of documented oppression? This is where the conversation gets really important. Because I'm not saying, and listen carefully to this, I'm not saying that systemic injustice doesn't exist. I'm not saying you should just accept it. I'm not saying you shouldn't work to change it. I'm not saying personal responsibility means ignoring collective responsibility. What I'm saying is that even in the face of genuine systemic injustice, you still have choices. You still have agency. You still have power. And if you spend all your energy focused on how the system is holding you down, you have no energy left to rise up anyway. Let me tell you about Keisha. Keisha was a young black woman who grew up in poverty, in a neighborhood devastated by systemic racism, in a school system that failed her, in a society that had been stacked against people who looked like her for centuries. And Keisha was angry. Rightfully angry. She was angry about slavery, about Jim Crow, about redlining, about police brutality, about all the ways, big and small, that America had hurt people like her, and her anger was justified. Everything she was angry about was real, was documented, was undeniable. But Keisha's anger was eating her alive. She was so focused on everything that was against her that she couldn't see anything that was for her. She was so consumed by the injustice of the system that she couldn't take advantage of the opportunities that did exist. She was so busy blaming white supremacy for her struggles that she wasn't taking responsibility for her choices. And before you judge her, before you think I'm being insensitive, understand I sat with Keisha. I listened to her. I validated her pain. I acknowledged the very real systemic barriers she faced. And then I asked her the same question I ask everyone. What are you going to do about it? She said. What can I do? The whole system is rigged. And I said, maybe it is. Probably it is. But that doesn't mean you're powerless. That doesn't mean you have no choices. That doesn't mean you can't build a good life anyway, she said. That's easy for you to say. And I said, you're right. It is easier for me to say. I have privileges you don't have. And that's not fair. And it's also true that you still have more power than you think you do. You can focus on what's against you, or you can focus on what you can do anyway. You can spend your life fighting the system, which is important work, or you can spend your life building your life, which is also important work, or you can do both. But you can't do either if all you're doing is blaming. This hit Keisha hard, because she realized she had been using systemic injustice as an excuse, not an excuse in the sense that the injustice wasn't real, it was real, but an excuse in the sense that she was using it as a reason not to try. She was using it as permission to not take full responsibility for her choices, her effort, her life. And I want to be clear, I'm not saying systemic injustice is an excuse. I'm saying we can use systemic injustice as an excuse. There's a difference. The injustice is real. Using it as a reason not to live fully is a choice. Keisha started to shift her focus. She stopped spending all her time on social media arguing about injustice and started spending that time learning skills that could improve her life. She stopped going to every protest, which, again, protests are important, and started going to networking events, to workshops, to places where she could build her future. She stopped surrounding herself with people who were just as angry and stuck as she was, and started surrounding herself with people who were fighting against injustice by building successful lives anyway. And her life started to change. Not because the system changed, the system didn't change, but because she changed. Because she stopped waiting for the system to give her permission to thrive, and started thriving anyway. And here's the beautiful thing now. Keisha is in a position to actually change the system in ways she never could before. Because she has resources, has influence, has a platform. Because she built her life up instead of letting her life be defined by what's been broken. Because she took responsibility for herself first, and now she can take responsibility for others too. She went from being a victim of the system to being someone who's actually fighting the system effectively. And that only happened when she stopped blaming and started building. This is what I want you to understand. Taking personal responsibility doesn't mean denying systemic problems. It doesn't mean saying injustice doesn't exist. It doesn't mean pulling yourself up by your bootstraps while ignoring that some people don't have boots. What it means is recognizing that even in an unjust system, you still have choices. Limited choices, maybe. Unfairly limited choices. But choices nonetheless. And you can use your energy to focus on how limited your choices are, or you can use your energy to make the most of the choices you have. One keeps you stuck. One sets you free. Now let me bring this to an even more personal level. Because some of you are thinking, okay, I get it for other people's stories, but you don't understand my situation. My situation is different. My situation is worse. My situation is uniquely impossible, and maybe you're right. Maybe your situation is especially difficult. But here's what I know, everyone thinks their situation is the exception. Everyone thinks their circumstances are the ones that justify staying stuck. Everyone has a reason why they can't take full responsibility, and most of those reasons are valid. And all of those reasons are still keeping you trapped. I want to tell you about the most extreme case I've ever worked with. This is Maria. Maria was sexually abused by her father from age 6 to age 14. When she finally told her mother didn't believe her. Her father was never prosecuted. Her family ostracized her for speaking out. She aged out of foster care with no support system, no family, no resources. By the time she was in her 20s, Maria had been homeless, addicted, in abusive relationships, and had attempted suicide twice. If anyone had a right to blame, to be bitter, to be stuck in victimhood, it was Maria. When Maria came to see me, she was 34 years old and barely holding on. She told me her story, and honestly, I had to take a moment, because the level of betrayal, of trauma, of abandonment she had experienced was almost incomprehensible. Every person who should have protected her had failed her. Every system that should have supported her had let her down. And I told her, Maria, what happened to you was horrific. It was evil. And nothing I say is going to minimize that or make it okay. But I need to ask you something. Do you want to keep suffering because of what your father did? Or do you want to heal despite what your father did? Maria started crying. She said, I don't know if I can heal. He took too much from me. And I said, he took a lot from you. He stole your childhood. He stole your innocence. He stole your trust. But there's one thing he can't take from you unless you give it to him, your future. He already has your past. Are you going to give him your future too? That question changed everything for Maria, because she realized she had been giving her father her entire life. Not just the years when he was abusing her, but all the years since. She had organized her entire adult life around what he did to her. Her addiction was about numbing the pain he caused. Her abusive relationships were about repeating the dynamic he established. Her suicide attempts were about escaping the life he ruined. Even in his absence, even decades later, he was still controlling her. And she didn't want to give him one more second. So Maria made a choice. The hardest, bravest choice I've ever witnessed. She decided to take full responsibility for her healing. Not for what happened to her that was his fault, his sin, his evil, but for what she did with what happened to her, for how she responded, for who she became, for whether she let it destroy her or whether she used it to build something meaningful. And I'm not going to lie to you, it was brutal. The hardest work either of us had ever done. Maria had to learn to trust again when every early experience taught her not to. She had to learn to love herself when she had been treated as unlovable. She had to learn to see herself as powerful when she had been made powerless. She had to learn to forgive herself for all the years she spent coping in destructive ways, to see that she had done the best she could with what she knew at the time. She had to grieve everything that was stolen from her while still showing up to build what could be created from here. But Maria did it. Over years of intense, committed work, Maria healed. Not perfectly, not completely, but genuinely. And today, Maria is a therapist who specializes in working with abuse survivors. She took the worst thing that ever happened to her and turned it into her deepest source of meaning and purpose. She took the pain that almost killed her and alchemized it into medicine for others. She stopped asking, why did this happen to me? And started asking, what can I do with this? And that shift, that one simple shift in question, changed everything. Maria told me once, toward the end of our work together, I spent 28 years hating my father, and it didn't hurt him at all. It only hurt me. And then I decided to stop giving him any more of my life. I decided that healing me was more important than hating him. And for the first time in my life, I felt powerful. Not because he changed, not because I forgave him. I haven't, and I don't know if I ever will. But because I took my power back, I stopped letting what he did define what I do. If Maria can do this, if someone who suffered that deeply, that young, that consistently, at the hands of the person who should have protected her most, if Maria can take full responsibility for her response and build a beautiful, meaningful life anyway, then so can you. Whatever you're blaming someone for, however justified that blame is, Maria's story shows us that it's possible to heal anyway. It's possible to thrive anyway. It's possible to take your life back anyway. This is the thing I need you to really hear. Taking responsibility is not about fairness. It's not about what's right. It's not about what should be. It's about what is. It's about recognizing that life is deeply, profoundly unfair. People hurt. People. Bad things happen to good people. Innocent children suffer. Systems are unjust. And you can spend your entire life focused on how unfair it all is, which is understandable, which is justified, which is completely valid. Or you can decide that despite the unfairness, despite the injustice, despite everything that shouldn't have happened but did happen, you're going to take full responsibility for who you become and what you create from here. That's the choice. That's always the choice. And it's the hardest choice there is, because it means letting go of the comfort of victimhood. It means releasing the familiar identity of being the one who was wronged. It means giving up the righteousness of blame. It means standing up and saying, what happened to me wasn't fair, and I'm taking full responsibility for my life anyway. It means becoming an adult in the deepest sense, someone who doesn't need life to be fair to still show up fully, someone who doesn't need others to change to be okay themselves, someone who owns their response to everything that happens, good or bad, fair or unfair, chosen or unchosen. Let me share one more type of story, because I think this will hit home for many of you. This is about Amanda. Amanda had a normal, privileged life. Good family, good education, good opportunities. Nothing dramatically traumatic. But Amanda was still stuck in blame. She blamed her mother for being overprotective, which made her anxious. She blamed her first boyfriend for breaking up with her, which made her insecure. She blamed her college advisor for bad advice, which led to career struggles. She blamed her boss for being difficult. She blamed her roommate for being inconsiderate. She blamed the economy, the dating culture, the housing market, the political climate. Now, were all these people perfect? No. Was some of this blame justified? Sure. But here's what Amanda couldn't see: she had made blame her operating system. Any time anything went wrong, her immediate response was to look for who to blame. She never took responsibility for her choices, her reactions, her part in any situation. It was always someone else's fault. And because of this, Amanda was stuck. Stuck in the same patterns, stuck in the same problems, stuck in the same level of unhappiness. When Amanda came to see me, she spent the first 3 sessions telling me about everyone who had wronged her. And at the end of the 3rd session, I said, Amanda, I notice you haven't once talked about yourself. You've talked about your mother, your ex, your boss, your friends, the world, but you haven't talked about you, about your choices, about your responses, about your responsibility. And I'm wondering if that's because it's easier to focus on their wrongs than on your power to respond differently. Amanda was offended at first. She said, So, you're saying it's all my fault? And I said, No. I'm saying that when everything is someone else's fault, you have no power, because you can't control them. You can only control you. And right now, you're giving away all your power by making everyone else responsible for your happiness, your success, your peace. What if you took it back? This was a turning point for Amanda, because she started to see the pattern. She started to notice how automatically she reached for blame, how quickly she externalized her problems, how consistently she made herself the victim of other people's choices. And she started to experiment with a different approach, taking responsibility, not for other people's behavior, but for her response to other people's behavior. It was hard at first, really hard, because Amanda had built her entire identity around being the person things happened to. She was the girl with the overprotective mother, the woman who got her heart broken, the employee with the difficult boss. Taking responsibility meant letting go of those identities. It meant standing on her own. It meant becoming someone who creates her life rather than someone to whom life happens. But as Amanda practiced this new way of being, everything started to shift. She stopped blaming her mother and started setting boundaries with compassion. She stopped blaming her ex and started learning from that relationship about what she actually wants. She stopped blaming her boss and started focusing on doing excellent work regardless of whether he noticed. And as she stopped giving her power away, she started getting her life back. She started feeling capable, started feeling confident, started feeling like the author of her story instead of a character in everyone else's drama. Amanda told me, months into this work, I didn't realize how exhausting it was to constantly be a victim, to always be at the mercy of other people's choices, to never feel like I had control. Taking responsibility is actually less work than blaming, because I'm not spending all my energy managing how everyone else shows up. I'm just managing how I show up. And that I can actually do. This is what I want you to get. Blame is exhausting. It's a full-time job, keeping track of all the ways everyone has wronged you, rehearsing the evidence, building the case, maintaining the resentment. It takes so much energy, energy that could be going toward actually building your life. And the beautiful thing is, the moment you stop blaming, you get all that energy back. You can redirect it from focusing on their wrongs to focusing on your rights, your right to be happy, to be free, to be powerful, to create the life you want regardless of what anyone else has done. Now, let's go even deeper. We've spent this time exploring the stories, seeing how blame shows up in real lives, understanding the cost of carrying that heavy backpack. And now, I want to give you the 8 core lessons that will completely transform how you relate to everything that's ever happened to you. These aren't quick tips. These aren't surface-level insights. These are deep philosophical and psychological truths that, when you really integrate them, change everything. Lesson 1 is this: you are not your past. This sounds simple, obvious even, but most people are completely identified with their history. They introduce themselves with their wounds. Hi, I'm the person whose father left. I'm the one who was betrayed. I'm the one who wasn't good enough. And they don't realize they're doing it. They don't realize they've made their past into their identity. They don't realize they're walking around wearing their history like a costume they can't take off. Here's what I want you to understand. Everything that happened to you happened to a previous version of you. You are not that person anymore. The you that was hurt, that was betrayed, that was let down, that person doesn't exist anymore. Not because the pain wasn't real, but because you've grown, you've changed, you've become someone different since then, and you can keep identifying with that old version of yourself, keep living as if you're still that hurt child, or that betrayed teenager, or that disappointed young adult. Or you can recognize that you're a different person now, a person who has the power to choose who they become regardless of who they were told they were. This is incredibly liberating when you really get it, because it means you're not trapped, you're not defined. You're not stuck being the person your past suggested you would be. You can be someone completely new. You can wake up tomorrow and choose to be someone who isn't carrying all that old pain. Not because the pain never happened, but because you're not the same person it happened to. You've evolved, and you can keep evolving past the identity your pain created. Think about it physically. Every cell in your body is replaced over time. You are literally not the same physical being you were 7 years ago. Every molecule, every atom is different. So why are you still carrying the emotional and psychological identity from decades ago? Why are you still being the person you were when that thing happened? You don't have to be. You can let that version of you go. You can honor what they went through while becoming someone new. This is what I mean by you are not your past. Your past happened. It shaped you. It influenced you. It wounded you. But it doesn't have to define you. Not anymore. Not unless you keep choosing to let it. And that's the key. It's a choice. Maybe not a conscious choice you made in the beginning, but it's a choice you're making every day to keep identifying with that old story, that old identity, that old version of yourself. And you can make a different choice, starting right now. Lesson 2 is about the difference between pain and suffering. This is huge. Most people think pain and suffering are the same thing. They're not. Pain is what happens to you. Suffering is what you do with what happens to you. Pain is inevitable. Life will hurt you. People will disappoint you. Things will go wrong. That's part of being human. That's part of being alive. But suffering is optional. Suffering is the story you tell yourself about the pain. Suffering is the meaning you make of it. Suffering is the identity you build around it. Let me explain with an example. Two people experience the same painful event, let's say a breakup. The relationship ends. That's the pain. That hurts. That's real. But then they each make meaning of it. One person says, "This relationship ended because I wasn't enough. I'm unlovable. I'll never find someone who stays. I'm destined to be alone." And they carry that story forward into every future relationship. They suffer for years, decades, maybe their whole life, because of the story they told themselves about the pain. The other person says, "This relationship ended because we weren't right for each other. It hurts right now, but it doesn't mean I'm unlovable. It means this particular person and I weren't a good match. And now I'm free to find someone who is a better match." Same pain, completely different suffering. Because one person made the pain mean something terrible about them, and the other person made it mean something neutral, maybe even something useful. This is what you need to understand. You can't control whether you experience pain. Life will hurt you. But you have complete control over whether you suffer, because suffering is a function of interpretation. It's a function of the story you tell yourself. It's a function of the meaning you assign, and you can change that story. You can change that meaning. You can choose to interpret what happened in a way that doesn't make you suffer forever. Now, some people hear this and they think I'm saying pain isn't real, or you should just think positive thoughts and everything will be fine. That's not what I'm saying. Pain is real. Grief is real. Heartbreak is real. I'm not minimizing that. What I'm saying is that there's a difference between feeling the pain and creating suffering on top of the pain, between grieving a loss and making that loss mean you're cursed, between being hurt and deciding you're permanently damaged. You can feel the pain fully, completely, without adding the extra layer of suffering that comes from the story you're telling yourself about what the pain means. You can say, "This hurts. This is hard. This is sad," without also saying, "This hurts, which means I'm broken. This is hard, which means I can't handle life. This is sad, which means I'll never be happy again." The first is pain. The second is suffering. And only the second is optional. This is why two people can go through similar experiences and come out completely different, not because one is stronger or better or more resilient, but because they told themselves different stories about what the experience meant. One created suffering on top of pain. The other just felt the pain and moved through it. And the difference in their lives, in their happiness, in their freedom, is profound. So here's the practice. When something painful happens, feel it. Don't avoid it. Don't numb it. Don't pretend it's not there. Feel the pain completely. But then pay attention to the story you're telling yourself about it. Notice if you're adding suffering on top of the pain. Notice if you're making it mean something terrible about you, about your future, about your life. And if you are, question that story. Ask yourself, is this the only way to interpret what happened? Is there another story, one that acknowledges the pain but doesn't create endless suffering? Because here's the truth, the pain will pass. Pain is temporary. It hurts intensely for a while, and then it fades. That's the nature of emotional pain. But suffering can last forever. Because suffering is the story you keep telling yourself, keep rehearsing, keep believing. And as long as you keep telling that story, you keep suffering, even when the original pain is long gone. Lesson 3 is about the concept of responsibility. Not responsibility in the traditional sense, but responsibility, your ability to respond. This is the core of everything we're talking about. You may not have control over what happens to you. You didn't choose to be hurt. You didn't choose to be betrayed. You didn't choose the difficult circumstances you were born into. But you have complete responsibility. You have the ability to choose how you respond. And this is where your power is. Not in controlling what happens to you, you can't control that, but in choosing your response to what happens to you, that's where your freedom is, that's where your agency is. That's where your power to create your life lives. In the space between what happens and how you respond. And that space, that gap, that's where everything changes. Viktor Frankl, who survived the Nazi concentration camps, said it better than I ever could. He said that between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. This man experienced arguably the worst that humans can do to each other. He lost his family. He lost his freedom. He lost almost everything. But he didn't lose his power to choose his response. And that's what saved him. Not physically, he was lucky to survive physically. But psychologically, spiritually, he saved himself by claiming his responsibility. This is what I'm inviting you to do. Not to minimize what happened to you, but to claim your power to respond to it. To recognize that even though you didn't choose what happened, you do choose what you do with it. You do choose who you become because of it. You do choose whether it defeats you or defines you in a new, empowered way. And here's the thing, most people don't realize they're responding. They think they're just reacting. They think their anger, their bitterness, their stuckness is just what naturally happens when someone hurts you. But it's not. It's a response. It's a choice. Maybe an unconscious choice, maybe an automatic choice, but a choice nonetheless. And once you see that it's a choice, once you reclaim your responsibility, everything changes. Because now you have power. Now you have agency. Now you're not just a victim of what happened. You're an active participant in what happens next. So start noticing your responses. When something triggers you, when something bothers you, when something brings up old pain, pause, just for a moment. And in that pause, recognize that you have a choice. You can respond the way you always have, with blame, with anger, with victimhood, or you can respond differently. You can respond from your power. You can respond as someone who owns their life completely. You can respond as someone who's free. And at first, you'll forget. You'll react automatically. You'll fall back into the old patterns. That's okay. That's part of the process. But over time, with practice, you'll remember more often. You'll catch yourself. You'll pause. And in that pause, you'll choose differently. And each time you choose differently, you're reinforcing your responsibility. You're building your power. You're becoming more free. Lesson 4 is about the distinction between fault and responsibility. This is where people get really confused. They think if something isn't their fault, they're not responsible for it. But that's not how it works. Fault is about the past. Responsibility is about the future. Fault is about who caused the problem. Responsibility is about who's going to solve it. And these are completely different things. What happened to you might not be your fault. In fact, it probably isn't. Most of the pain we carry was caused by other people, by their choices, their failures, their wounds, That's their fault. That's their responsibility in the sense of moral culpability. But here's the thing. Even though it's their fault, it's your responsibility to heal. Even though they caused the wound, you're responsible for the healing. Not because that's fair, but because you're the only one who can do it. You're the only one living your life. You're the only one who will suffer if you don't heal. So it's your responsibility. Think of it like this. If someone breaks into your house and trashes it, that's not your fault. That's their fault. They're morally responsible. They should face consequences. But if you want to live in that house again, you're responsible for cleaning it up. You could sit there in the mess saying, "This isn't fair. They should clean this up." And you'd be right. But you'd also be living in a trashed house. Or you can recognize that even though it's not your fault, it's your responsibility to clean it up because you're the one who has to live there. That's what healing is. That's what taking responsibility for your response is. It's not saying what they did was okay. It's not saying you caused it. It's saying, they broke it, and I'm going to fix it, because I'm the one living in this life, and I want it to be good. And this is hard to accept, because it feels unfair. It is unfair. But the alternative is waiting for the person who broke you to fix you. And they might never do it. They might not even know how. They might not even care. So you can wait forever. Or you can say, "Fine, I'll do it myself." And that's not weakness. That's not letting them off the hook. That's power. That's taking your life back. I've worked with so many people who are stuck on this distinction. They say, "But it's not my fault." And I say, "You're absolutely right. It's not your fault, and it's still your responsibility to heal." And they resist this. They resist it because they want the person who hurt them to be responsible for fixing it. They want justice. They want fairness. And I understand that. But wanting it doesn't make it happen. And waiting for it keeps you stuck. So you have to make a choice. Do you want to be right, or do you want to be free? Do you want to wait for them to take responsibility, or do you want to take it yourself? Do you want to hold out for fairness, or do you want to move forward anyway? Because you can have your righteousness, or you can have your life. But often, you can't have both. And here's what's interesting. When you take full responsibility for your healing, when you stop waiting for them to fix what they broke, you often find that you're more capable than you thought, that you're stronger than you believed, that you don't actually need them to heal. You have everything you need within you. And that realization, that's the beginning of real freedom. So here's the practice for this lesson. Make a list of everything you're blaming someone else for. Every way you're saying, "I would be happy except for what they did. I would be successful except for how they failed me. I would be healed except for their wrong." Write it all down. And then for each one, ask yourself, is this their fault? The answer might be yes. Probably is yes. But then ask, is it my responsibility to heal from it? And the answer to that has to be yes too. Because you're the only one who can heal you. You're the only one living your life. And waiting for them to take responsibility is giving them power they don't deserve and guaranteeing your own continued suffering. Now, let's go deeper with Lesson 5, and this one might be the hardest one to accept. This lesson is about the gift in the wound. And I know what you're thinking. There's no gift in being hurt. There's no silver lining in trauma, and I'm not saying there is. I'm not saying that what happened to you was good or meant to be or happened for a reason. I'm saying that you can find meaning in it anyway. You can create a gift from it anyway. Not because the pain itself was a gift, but because you can alchemize it into one. Every person I've told you about today, Sarah, Michael, Jennifer, David, Lisa, Robert, Maria, Keisha, Amanda, every single one of them found a gift in their wound. Not because the wound was good, but because they chose to make something valuable from it. Sarah found her independence. Michael found his capacity for intimacy. Jennifer found her sense of self. David learned not to play small. Lisa discovered who she was beyond her trauma. Robert found purpose in helping other veterans. Maria became a healer. Keisha built a successful life. Amanda learned to own her choices. The wound didn't give them these gifts. They created these gifts from the wound. This is a crucial distinction. I'm not saying be grateful for the abuse, for the betrayal, for the injustice. I'm saying that once it's happened, once you can't change it, you have a choice about what you do with it. You can let it destroy you, or you can let it develop you. You can let it make you bitter, or you can let it make you better. You can let it close your heart, or you can let it break your heart, open to more compassion, more depth, more understanding of human suffering. And I know this is hard to hear when you're in the middle of the pain. When you're freshly hurt, the last thing you want to hear is that there might be a gift in this. And I'm not saying you should look for it right away. First, you feel the pain. First, you grieve. First, you let yourself be broken. But then, when you're ready, when you've felt it fully, you can start to ask, what can I make of this? What can I learn from this? How can I grow from this? How can I use this to help others who are hurting the same way? Because here's what I've learned. The most compassionate people are the ones who've suffered. The most wise people are the ones who've been broken. The most powerful healers are the ones who've had to heal themselves. Your wound, if you let it, if you work with it, if you transmute it, can become your greatest source of strength, wisdom, and purpose. Not because the wound itself was good, but because you're powerful enough to make something good from it. This is the ultimate taking back of your power. Not just healing from what hurt you, but using what hurt you as raw material for creating meaning, for creating purpose, for creating a life that matters. This is when you stop being a victim and become an alchemist, someone who takes the lead of suffering and transforms it into the gold of wisdom and compassion. But you can't do this if you're still blaming. You can't alchemize what you're still resenting. You can't transform what you're still carrying as proof of their wrong. You have to put it down first. You have to release the blame first. And then, from that place of freedom, you can look at what happened and ask, what gift can I create from this? What meaning can I make? How can I use this to serve, to grow, to become more fully human? And this doesn't mean you're glad it happened. It doesn't mean you'd choose it again. It doesn't mean you think it was good. It just means you're not going to let it be meaningless. You're not going to let all that suffering be for nothing. You're going to make something from it. You're going to let it teach you something. You're going to let it shape you into someone deeper, someone wiser, someone more compassionate than you could have been without it. Lesson 6 is about the illusion of closure. So many people are waiting for closure, waiting for the apology, waiting for the explanation, waiting for the other person to finally understand what they did and make it right. And they think once they get that closure, then they can move on, then they can heal, then they can be free. But here's what nobody tells you. Closure is a myth. Real closure comes from within. It comes from you deciding you're done, not from them giving you permission to be done. Think about it. How many times have you actually gotten real closure? How many times has someone who hurt you come back with the perfect apology, the full understanding, the complete acknowledgement of what they did and how it affected you? Almost never, right? And even when it does happen, even when you do get the apology, you often find that it doesn't give you what you thought it would. You thought the apology would set you free, but you still feel stuck. You thought the closure would heal the wound, but it's still there. That's because real healing doesn't come from them. It comes from you. Real closure doesn't come from their apology. It comes from your decision to move forward regardless of whether they ever apologize. Real freedom doesn't come from them finally understanding. It comes from you no longer needing them to understand. This is one of the most liberating realizations you can have. You don't need anything from them to heal. You don't need their apology. You don't need their acknowledgement. You don't need their regret. You don't need them to change. You don't need them to see what they did. You don't need anything from them at all, because you can close that chapter yourself. You can give yourself closure. You can decide you're done waiting and start living. Here's how you do it. You write the ending yourself. Not literally, though writing can help, but psychologically, emotionally, you decide, this chapter is over. I don't know why they did what they did. I don't know if they understand. I don't know if they're sorry, and I don't need to know. I'm closing this chapter. I'm done. I'm moving forward. I'm taking my life back. And you mean it. You stop waiting. You stop hoping for the closure that might never come. You give it to yourself, and this doesn't mean you pretend it didn't happen. It doesn't mean you suppress your feelings about it. It means you acknowledge what happened. You feel what you feel about it, and then you choose to move forward anyway. You choose to write the next chapter of your life without needing them to be a part of that process. You choose to be the one who decides when you're done, not them. Because here's the thing, as long as you're waiting for closure from them, they have power over you. They're the gatekeeper to your healing. They're the one who decides when you get to move on. And that's no way to live. That's keeping yourself in prison and giving them the key. But when you realize you can give yourself closure, when you realize you don't need anything from them, you take the key back. You open the door yourself. You walk out free. I've seen this transform people's lives. People who've been stuck for years waiting for that apology, that explanation, that moment of closure. And then they realize they can give it to themselves. They can decide they're done, and they're free immediately. Not because anything external changed, but because they changed internally. They stopped waiting and started living. Lesson 7 is about boundaries versus walls. This is crucial. When people get hurt, their natural response is to build walls, to protect themselves, to keep everyone out, to never be vulnerable again. And I understand that. I've done it myself. But here's what I've learned. Walls don't protect you. They isolate you. They keep you safe, but they also keep you alone. They prevent further pain, but they also prevent connection, love, intimacy, growth. What you need instead of walls are boundaries, and these are very different things. A wall says, no one gets in. A boundary says, here's what's okay and what's not okay. A wall keeps everyone out. A boundary lets the right people in and keeps the wrong people out. A wall is rigid, unmoving, indiscriminate. A boundary is flexible, intelligent, discerning. When you build walls after being hurt, you're protecting yourself from the wrong thing. You're protecting yourself from all people, instead of from people who behave badly. You're protecting yourself from vulnerability instead of from people who take advantage of vulnerability. You're protecting yourself from pain instead of from people who cause unnecessary pain. And in doing so, you're cutting yourself off from everything good too. From love, from connection, from intimacy, from the very things that make life worth living. But boundaries are wise. Boundaries say, I'm open to connection, but not with people who treat me badly. I'm willing to be vulnerable, but not with people who weaponize my vulnerability. I'm going to trust, but I'm going to trust discerningly, giving people the opportunity to earn that trust over time. Boundaries protect you without isolating you. They keep you safe while still keeping you open to the possibility of real connection. And here's the thing about boundaries: you can only set them from a place of power, from a place of having taken full responsibility for yourself. Because boundaries aren't about controlling other people, they're about controlling what you will and won't accept in your life. They're about saying, if you treat me this way, I will disengage. Not to punish you, but to protect myself. Not because I hate you, but because I love myself. And that can only come from a place of genuine self-responsibility and self-worth. People who are stuck in blame can't set good boundaries because they're too busy blaming others for crossing boundaries they never actually set. They're too busy being angry at people for doing things they never clearly communicated were not okay. They're too busy feeling victimized to actually protect themselves. But when you take responsibility, when you own your power, you can set clear boundaries. You can say, this is what I need. This is what I'm willing to accept. This is what I'm not. And you can enforce those boundaries, not out of anger or punishment, but out of self-respect and self-care. So here's the practice. Look at the walls you've built, the ways you've shut down, the ways you've protected yourself by keeping everyone out, and ask yourself, is this wall serving me, or is it just keeping me isolated? And then start thinking about what boundaries would look like instead. What would it look like to be open but discerning, to be vulnerable but protected, to let people in while still keeping yourself safe? And you might need to learn how to set boundaries if you never learned. You might need to practice saying no. Practice stating your needs. Practice disengaging when someone crosses a line. It might feel uncomfortable at first, might feel mean or selfish or rude, but it's not. It's healthy. It's necessary. It's how you protect yourself without isolating yourself. It's how you stay open to connection without being naive about people who might hurt you. Lesson 8 is about the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation. This is huge, and most people get this wrong. They think if you forgive someone, you have to let them back into your life. They think forgiveness means reconciliation. It doesn't. These are two completely separate things, and you need to understand the difference. Forgiveness is internal. It's something you do for yourself. It's releasing the anger, the resentment, the desire for revenge. It's letting go of the story that they owe you something. It's deciding to stop carrying their wrong. It's freeing yourself from the prison of blame, and you can forgive someone without ever speaking to them again. You can forgive someone who doesn't even know you've forgiven them. You can forgive someone who isn't sorry. Because forgiveness isn't about them. It's about you. It's about your freedom. Reconciliation, on the other hand, is external. It's about the relationship. It's about both people working to rebuild trust, to repair what was broken, to create something new together. And reconciliation requires participation from both parties. It requires the other person to acknowledge what they did, to take responsibility, to change their behavior, to earn back trust over time. And if they're not willing to do that, reconciliation isn't possible. And that's okay. You can still forgive. This is so important to understand because so many people resist forgiveness because they think it means they have to let that person back into their life. It doesn't. You can forgive your abusive parent and still never see them again. You can forgive your betraying friend and still end the friendship. You can forgive your unfaithful partner and still get divorced. Forgiveness doesn't mean what they did was okay. It doesn't mean they get a free pass. It doesn't mean there are no consequences. It means you're free from carrying the weight of it. And here's why forgiveness matters not for them, but for you. Because unforgiveness is poison. It's acid that corrodes the container it's in. It's a burden you carry that doesn't touch them at all. They're out living their life, and you're carrying the weight of what they did. That's not justice. That's just you suffering. Forgiveness is putting down that weight. It's saying, what you did was wrong, and I'm not going to carry it anymore. I'm going to be free. Now, forgiveness is not always appropriate or necessary. If you're not ready to forgive, don't force it. Premature forgiveness is just bypassing your real feelings, just spiritual superiority that hasn't done the actual work. Real forgiveness comes after you've felt the full weight of the hurt, after you've grieved, after you've been angry, after you've processed it completely, and then, from that place of having fully felt it, you choose to release it. Not because they deserve forgiveness, but because you deserve freedom. And sometimes, forgiveness isn't a one-time event. It's a practice. You forgive, and then something triggers you, and you're angry again. So you forgive again, and again. Each time releasing a little more, letting go a little more, freeing yourself a little more. It's not linear. It's a spiral. You come back to it again and again, each time from a different place, each time releasing a little more. But here's what you need to know. You don't have to forgive to be free. Some people will tell you that forgiveness is necessary for healing, and for some people, it is. But for others, it's not. Some wounds are so deep, so severe, that forgiveness feels impossible, and that's okay. What you do need is to release the active resentment, to stop spending your energy hating them, to stop giving them power over your present. And you can do that without forgiving. You can do that by simply deciding you're done giving them space in your life, done giving them energy, done letting them occupy your mind. And that's enough. That's freedom too. So don't let anyone pressure you into forgiveness before you're ready. And don't confuse forgiveness with reconciliation. You can forgive someone and never see them again. You can release the resentment and still have firm boundaries. You can free yourself without freeing them from the consequences of their actions. Forgiveness is for you, not for them. And whether you choose it or not, what matters is that you find a way to stop carrying their wrong, to stop letting it define you, to stop giving them power over your life. Now, I want to go deeper into how these 8 lessons work together, because they're not separate ideas, they're interconnected insights that build on each other. When you really understand that you're not your past, it becomes easier to separate pain from suffering. When you reclaim your responsibility, it becomes easier to see the distinction between fault and responsibility. When you stop waiting for closure, it becomes easier to set boundaries instead of walls. They all support each other. They all work together to create one coherent shift from victimhood to authorship. Let me give you a deeper understanding of how this plays out in real time. Imagine you're in a situation where someone treats you badly. Maybe a colleague undermines you at work. Maybe a family member says something cruel. Maybe a friend lets you down. In that moment, you have a choice about how you're going to respond, and that choice is shaped by these 8 lessons. If you're still identified with your past, if you're still being the person who was always undermined, always dismissed, always let down, you'll respond from that identity. You'll react as the victim. You'll blame them. You'll make it mean something terrible about you or about them or about the world. You'll suffer on top of the pain. You'll wait for them to apologize before you can move on. You'll build walls to protect yourself from ever being hurt again, and you'll stay stuck. But if you've integrated these lessons, you respond differently. You recognize that, yes, this person treated you badly, and that's their choice, their responsibility, their failing. But you also recognize that you're not the accumulation of everyone who's ever treated you badly. You're a person with the power to choose your response right now. You feel the pain, it hurts to be treated badly, but you don't create suffering on top of it by making it mean you're worthless or the world is terrible. You claim your responsibility. You decide how you're going to handle this. You recognize that it's not your fault they treated you badly, but it is your responsibility to protect yourself and to not let this incident define you or derail you. You don't wait for them to apologize or explain or make it right. You give yourself closure. You decide this interaction is over and you're moving forward. You set a boundary. Maybe you distance yourself from this person. Maybe you have a direct conversation about what's acceptable. Maybe you just disengage emotionally, but you don't build a wall around your heart. You stay open to connection with people who treat you well while protecting yourself from people who don't. And you find the gift in this experience. Maybe it's learning to stand up for yourself. Maybe it's clarifying what kind of people you want in your life. Maybe it's developing compassion for how hurt people hurt people. All of this happens in the span of maybe a few hours or days. Not because you're superhuman, but because you've done the work. You've integrated these lessons. You've practiced responding from power instead of reacting from pain. And over time, it becomes more natural. It becomes who you are. It becomes your default way of being in the world. This is what I mean when I say this work changes everything. It's not just about healing from one specific wound. It's about developing a completely different way of relating to all wounds, all difficulties, all challenges. It's about becoming someone who can handle whatever life throws at them, not because life stops throwing things, but because they've developed the capacity to respond powerfully no matter what happens. Now let's talk about the deeper spiritual dimension of all this. Because what we're really talking about here, underneath all the psychology and the stories and the practices, is a fundamental shift in how you see yourself and your relationship to life. We're talking about moving from a position of separation and victimhood to a position of wholeness and responsibility. From seeing yourself as someone at the mercy of external forces to seeing yourself as a creator, as an author, as a conscious agent in your own life. This shift, this is what spiritual traditions have been pointing to for thousands of years. Buddhism talks about non-attachment, about not clinging to your suffering. Christianity talks about forgiveness, about loving your enemies, about turning the other cheek. Stoicism talks about focusing on what you can control and accepting what you can't. Different language, different frameworks, but the same essential insight: your freedom doesn't come from changing external circumstances. It comes from changing your relationship to external circumstances. And this is hard for the modern mind to accept, because we've been taught that happiness comes from getting what we want, from having things go our way, from being treated well. And there's truth in that, of course. It's easier to be happy when life is good, but real happiness, deep happiness, sustainable happiness, that comes from something else. It comes from not needing life to be good to be okay. It comes from being able to be at peace even when things are hard. It comes from finding your center, your worth, your power from within rather than from without. This is what taking responsibility for your response really means at the deepest level. It means recognizing that your inner state is not determined by your outer circumstances, that you can be free regardless of what's happening around you, that you can be at peace even when you have every reason not to be, not because you're in denial, not because you're suppressing your feelings, but because you found a deeper ground to stand on. A ground that can't be shaken by what other people do or don't do. And I'm not saying this is easy. I'm not saying you'll achieve this perfectly. I'm saying it's possible. I'm saying it's the work. I'm saying that every moment you choose response over reaction, you're moving in this direction. Every moment you choose freedom over righteousness, you're building this capacity. Every moment you choose power over victimhood, you're becoming more of who you really are. Not the wounded person, not the one who was wronged, but the eternal you, the unbreakable you, the you that exists independent of anything that's ever happened to you. This is profound liberation. This is what all the great spiritual teachers have been trying to show us, that we're not our circumstances, we're not our history, we're not even our thoughts and feelings. We're the awareness that experiences all of that. We're the consciousness that can observe it all and choose how to respond. And when you really get this, when you really live from this place, blame becomes impossible. Because blame requires you to believe that your inner state is caused by external events. But when you know, really know, that your inner state is your choice, your creation, your responsibility, there's nothing to blame anyone for. They did what they did, and you choose how you respond. And in that choice is all your power, all your freedom, all your peace. Now, I want to address something that might be coming up for you as you listen to all this. You might be thinking, this sounds great in theory, but how do I actually do it? How do I actually make this shift? How do I go from being someone who blames to someone who takes full responsibility? How do I integrate these lessons into my actual life, into the messy reality of difficult relationships and old wounds and daily triggers? That's what the next section is about, the practical application, the daily practices, the specific techniques. But before we get there, I want to talk about the process of change itself, because understanding how change works will help you be patient with yourself, will help you not get discouraged when it's hard, will help you keep going even when you're tempted to go back to the familiar comfort of blame. Change doesn't happen in a straight line. You don't just decide to stop blaming and then never blame again. You don't just learn these lessons and immediately embody them perfectly. Change is messy. It's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It's insight and practice and falling back into old patterns and catching yourself and trying again. It's a spiral, not a straight line. You keep coming back to the same lessons, the same challenges, the same old wounds, but each time from a slightly different place, with slightly more awareness, with slightly more capacity to choose differently. So be patient with yourself. Be compassionate with yourself. This is hard work. You're changing patterns that have been there for years, maybe decades. You're letting go of identities that have felt like who you are. You're building new capacities that don't come naturally at first. Of course it's hard. Of course you'll forget. Of course you'll fall back. That's not failure. That's part of the process. What matters is that you keep coming back, that you keep practicing, that you keep choosing over and over to respond from power instead of reacting from pain. Because each time you do, you're reinforcing new neural pathways. You're building new habits. You're becoming someone different. And over time, what felt impossible becomes difficult. What felt difficult becomes manageable. What felt manageable becomes natural. And one day, you realize you're not the same person you were. You've changed. Not perfectly, not completely, but genuinely. And that change, that's everything. Let me also address the role of support in this process, because you can't do this alone. I mean, you can, it's possible, but it's much harder. Much more likely that you'll give up, that you'll fall back into old patterns, that you'll convince yourself it's not worth it. You need support. You need people who understand this work. You need mirrors who can reflect back to you when you're in your patterns and when you're out of them. You need encouragement when it's hard and celebration when you make progress. This might be a therapist, a coach, a mentor. It might be a support group, a community, a circle of friends who are also doing this work. It might be online communities, books, videos like this that remind you of what's possible and how to get there. But you need something. You need some external support for this internal journey. And you also need to be discerning about who you spend time with. Because if you're trying to take responsibility and everyone around you is stuck in blame, it's going to be really hard. If you're trying to stop being a victim and everyone around you sees themselves as victims, you're going to be pulled back. If you're trying to find the gift in your wounds and everyone around you is just rehearsing their grievances, you're going to struggle to maintain your new perspective. This doesn't mean you abandon everyone who's not on this path, but it does mean you need to be intentional about who you're influenced by, who you're spending significant time with, who you're taking in ideas and perspectives from. Surround yourself, as much as possible, with people who are also taking responsibility for their lives, with people who are also doing this work, with people who will support you in staying in your power rather than colluding with you in your victimhood. And pay attention to what you're consuming, what you're reading, watching, listening to, because all of that is shaping how you think, how you see the world, how you relate to your experiences. If you're consuming a lot of content that's focused on blame, on victimhood, on how terrible everything is and how powerless we all are, that's going to reinforce those patterns in you. But if you're consuming content that's focused on responsibility, on empowerment, on possibility and growth and transformation, that's going to support the changes you're trying to make. You're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, as the saying goes. But you're also the average of the 5 ideas you think about most often, the 5 sources of input you consume most regularly. So be intentional, be discerning. Curate your mental and social environment to support the person you're becoming, not the person you've been. Now, let me talk about the role of emotion in all of this, because I've been talking a lot about responsibility and choice and power, and some of you might be thinking, what about my feelings? What about my anger, my hurt, my grief? Am I supposed to just not feel those things? Am I supposed to just think positive and pretend everything's fine? No, absolutely not. In fact, feeling your feelings fully is essential to this work. You can't heal what you don't feel. You can't release what you won't acknowledge. You can't transform what you're suppressing. So feel everything. Feel the hurt, feel the anger, feel the grief, feel the rage, feel the betrayal. Feel the disappointment. Feel it all, completely, without judgment, without trying to fix it or change it or make it go away. But here's the distinction. Feel it without becoming it. Feel the anger without becoming an angry person. Feel the hurt without becoming a hurt person. Feel the victimization without becoming a victim. There's a difference between experiencing an emotion and making it your identity. There's a difference between feeling hurt and being hurt. There's a difference between experiencing pain and suffering endlessly. So the practice is this: when a difficult emotion arises, you feel it. You let it move through you. You don't suppress it, don't avoid it, don't numb it. You feel it fully. But you also don't identify with it. You don't make it mean something permanent about you or your life. You say, right now, I'm feeling anger. Right now, I'm feeling hurt. Not, I am angry. I am hurt. It's subtle, but it's crucial. One keeps you in relationship with the emotion, able to feel it and let it pass. The other makes you the emotion, trapped in it, unable to move beyond it. And you can do both things at once, feel your feelings completely and take full responsibility for your response. In fact, you have to do both. Feeling your feelings is part of taking responsibility. Suppressing them, numbing them, avoiding them, that's actually avoiding responsibility. Because you're responsible for your inner experience, which means you're responsible for fully feeling and processing your emotions, not for making them go away or pretending they're not there. So if you're angry at someone who hurt you, feel that anger. Really feel it. Let it burn through you. Maybe you need to scream into a pillow or hit a punching bag or write a letter you never send. Do what you need to do to let that anger move through you. But don't use that anger as an excuse to stay stuck. Don't make that anger into an identity. Don't let that anger keep you from taking responsibility for your healing and your growth in your life. This is the both and of this work. It's not either or. It's not either you feel your feelings or you take responsibility. It's both. You feel your feelings and you take responsibility. You acknowledge the pain and you choose your response. You honor what happened and you create what's next. Both things. Always both things. Now let me talk about what happens on the other side of this work. Because I want you to know what's possible. I want you to have a vision of where you're headed. I want you to understand what life looks like when you've really integrated these lessons, when you've really stopped blaming and started owning your response completely. First, you'll feel lighter, physically, emotionally, spiritually lighter, because you're not carrying all that weight anymore. You're not carrying the backpack of everyone else's wrongs. You're not carrying the burden of resentment. You're not carrying the heaviness of victimhood. You've put it all down, and without that weight, you can move more freely. You can be more present. You can engage with life more fully. Second, you'll feel more powerful. Not power over others, power within yourself. The power that comes from knowing you can handle whatever happens. The power that comes from trusting yourself to respond well to difficulty. The power that comes from no longer being at the mercy of other people's choices. You'll stop feeling like a leaf blown by the wind and start feeling like a tree with deep roots, still affected by storms, still moved by strong winds, but not uprooted, not destroyed, not helpless. Third, you'll feel more connected, because walls will come down, because you'll be able to be vulnerable again without it feeling dangerous, because you'll be able to trust discerningly instead of either trusting everyone naively or trusting no one defensively. You'll be able to have real intimacy, real depth, real connection with people who deserve it, and you'll be able to do this while still protecting yourself from people who don't. Fourth, you'll feel more purposeful, because you'll have transformed your pain into wisdom, your wounds into medicine, your suffering into service. You'll have found meaning in what happened to you, not because it was good, but because you made something good from it. And that meaning will give your life a depth and a direction it might not have had otherwise. Fifth, you'll feel more at peace. Not because your life is perfect, it won't be. Not because nothing difficult ever happens, it will. But because you'll know, deep in your bones, that you can handle it. That you have the capacity to respond powerfully to whatever arises. That your happiness doesn't depend on external circumstances. That you're okay. Fundamentally okay, regardless of what's happening around you. And that peace, that's priceless. That's what everyone's looking for. That's what all this work is in service of. And sixth, you'll feel more free. This is the big one. This is what it all comes down to. Freedom. Not the freedom to control everything, to have everything go your way, to never be hurt again, but the freedom to be fully yourself, regardless of what happens. The freedom to choose your response. The freedom to not be defined by your past. The freedom to create your future. The freedom to live as the author of your story instead of a character in someone else's. This is the ultimate gift of taking full responsibility. This is why it's worth it. This is what's waiting for you on the other side of blame. I want to paint this picture for you really clearly. Imagine waking up tomorrow and someone who used to trigger you, someone you've been blaming, someone who represents an old wound. Imagine they do that thing they do. They say that thing they say. They treat you that way they treat you. And instead of spiraling, instead of spending hours or days replaying it, resenting it, suffering over it, you just respond. You feel the momentary sting. You acknowledge they did what they did, and then you choose your response. Maybe you set a boundary. Maybe you disengage. Maybe you have a direct conversation. Whatever you choose, you do it from power, not from pain. And then you move on. You don't carry it. You don't let it ruin your day. You don't make it mean something terrible about you or about life. You just move on. That's the shift. That's what this looks like in practice. And it's possible. It's absolutely possible. Every person I've told you about today made this shift. And if they could, you can. Whatever you're dealing with, whatever you're carrying, whatever you're blaming someone for, you can put it down. You can take your power back. You can be free. Not someday. Not after they change. Not after you get the closure, or the apology, or the justice. Now, today, with one decision, one shift, one short move from victim to author. So now let's get practical. Let's talk about the daily practices that will help you make this shift real in your life. Because understanding is one thing, embodying is another. You can understand these lessons intellectually and still find yourself falling back into blame automatically. You need practices. You need habits. You need daily reminders and exercises that rewire your brain, that build new neural pathways, that make responding from power more natural than reacting from pain. Practice 1 is the morning intention. Every morning, before you even get out of bed, before you check your phone, before you engage with the world, take 2 minutes to set your intention for the day. And the intention is simple today. I take full responsibility for my response to whatever happens. That's it. You're not trying to control what happens. You're not trying to prevent difficult things. You're just claiming your power to respond consciously, powerfully, freely to whatever arises. Say it out loud if you can. Feel it in your body. Let it anchor you before the day even begins. This practice might seem simple, almost too simple. But it's profound, because it sets the tone. It reminds you who you're choosing to be before the world starts making demands on you. It puts you in your power before anything challenges that power. And over time, this daily intention becomes part of your operating system. It becomes automatic. You wake up already in that mindset of responsibility and power. Practice 2 is the pause. Throughout your day, when something triggers you, when something bothers you, when you feel that old familiar urge to blame, pause just for 3 seconds. 3 seconds. Where you don't react, where you don't say anything, where you don't do anything. Just pause. And in that pause, take 1 breath, 1 deep, conscious breath. And then ask yourself one question: how do I want to respond to this? Not how do you have to respond, not how did you always respond, but how do you want to respond? What response would you be proud of? What response would come from your power instead of your pain? And then, to the best of your ability, respond that way. You won't always get it right. Sometimes you'll pause and still react poorly. That's okay. The practice is the pause itself. The practice is creating that space between stimulus and response, and over time, that space gets bigger. And your ability to choose wisely in that space gets stronger. Practice 3 is the daily review. Every evening, before you go to bed, review your day. Not to judge yourself, not to beat yourself up, but to learn, to notice patterns, to see where you responded from power and where you reacted from pain, where you took responsibility and where you blamed, where you were free and where you were stuck. Just notice, just observe, and maybe write it down. Nothing elaborate, just a few sentences. Today I blamed X for Y. Today I took responsibility for Z. Today I felt triggered by A, and I responded by B. This practice builds self-awareness, and self-awareness is the foundation of all change. You can't change what you're not aware of. You can't choose differently if you don't notice the pattern. So this daily review, this nightly reflection, it helps you see yourself more clearly. It helps you catch the patterns. It helps you notice when you're growing and when you're stuck. And that noticing, that awareness, that's how you change. Practice 4 is the reframe. When you catch yourself in a blame story, when you notice you're focused on what someone did to you and how it's their fault you're stuck, pause and reframe. Ask yourself, what's the responsibility version of this story? Not the blame version, but the responsibility version. What did they do, and what am I going to do about it? What happened, and how am I going to respond? What was taken from me, and what am I going to create anyway? This isn't about denying what happened. It's about shifting your focus from what you can't control them to what you can control you. From what was done to you to what you're going to do from here. From victim story to author story. And every time you do this reframe, every time you shift from blame to responsibility, you're building that muscle. You're making it stronger. You're making it more automatic. Practice 5 is the compassion practice. This one's really important. Because taking responsibility can sometimes slide into self-blame, into being hard on yourself, into beating yourself up for not being perfect. And that's not the point. That's not helpful. So every day, practice compassion for yourself. Specifically, compassion for the part of you that wants to blame. The part that's scared, that's hurt, that's trying to protect you by making it someone else's fault. Talk to that part. Say, I know you're scared. I know you're hurting. I know you're trying to keep me safe. Thank you, but I've got this. I can keep us safe. I can handle this. I can take responsibility and be okay. You don't have to do this alone anymore. I'm here. I've got you. And really mean it. Really feel compassion for that wounded, scared part of yourself that's been carrying this for so long. Because blame isn't evil. It's a protection mechanism. It's how you've been trying to cope, and you can appreciate that while also choosing to evolve beyond it. Practice 6 is the gratitude practice. Every day, find one thing you're grateful for that came from something difficult, one gift that emerged from a wound, one strength you developed because of a challenge, one insight you gained from pain, just one thing, and really feel the gratitude for it. Not gratitude for the pain itself, but for what you made from it, for how you grew, for who you became. This practice trains your brain to look for the gift, to find meaning in difficulty, to see possibility in pain. And over time, this becomes automatic. You stop seeing difficulties as just obstacles and start seeing them as opportunities, as raw material for your growth, as fuel for your transformation. And when you can see difficulties this way, blame becomes much less appealing, because you're not focused on who to blame. You're focused on what to make of it. Practice 7 is the boundary practice. This is about noticing when you need to set a boundary and actually setting it. Most people who've been hurt have terrible boundaries. Either they have no boundaries, they let everyone treat them however, or they have walls they let no one in. The practice is to find the middle ground, to set clear, firm, compassionate boundaries. So, every day, ask yourself, where do I need a boundary today? Where is someone crossing a line? Where am I accepting treatment that doesn't work for me? And then practice stating that boundary clearly and calmly, not in anger, not in blame, but in clarity. This is what works for me. This is what doesn't. If you continue to do X, I will need to do Y. not to punish you, but to take care of myself. And then follow through. If they cross the boundary, you do what you said you would do. Every time. Consistently. Because boundaries without consequences are just requests. And you're not requesting permission to take care of yourself. You're claiming that right. Practice 8 is the closure ritual. For those big wounds, those major grievances, those relationships or events that you've been carrying for a long time, create a closure ritual. This is a conscious, intentional way of giving yourself closure, of deciding you're done, of releasing the weight. It might look like writing a letter you never send, saying everything you need to say, and then burning it. It might look like a visualization where you imagine handing back to them everything they gave you that you don't want to carry anymore, the pain, the anger, the sense of worthlessness, and then walking away free. It might look like a ceremony where you symbolically release them, maybe releasing a balloon or throwing something into water or burying something in the ground, whatever feels meaningful to you. The point is to mark the moment, to make it real. To create a before and after. Before this ritual, I was carrying this. After this ritual, I'm not. Before, I was waiting for them to free me. After, I freed myself. It's powerful. It's transformative. And it gives your brain and your heart a clear signal this chapter is closed. I'm moving forward now. Practice 9 is the mirror work. This one's borrowed from Louise Hay, and it's incredibly powerful. Every day, look at yourself in the mirror. Look into your own eyes and say, I love you. I take full responsibility for my life. I choose to be free. It feels awkward at first. It might make you cry. It might bring up a lot of resistance. But stay with it. Do it every day, because what you're doing is reclaiming yourself, loving yourself, choosing yourself, taking full ownership of yourself. And that's the foundation of everything we're talking about. Practice 10 is the community practice. Don't do this alone. Find others who are on this path, who are also taking responsibility, who are also choosing freedom over blame. Meet regularly. Share your struggles. Support each other. Celebrate each other's wins. Hold each other accountable, because this work is hard, and it's so much easier when you're not doing it alone. This might be a formal group. It might be a few friends. It might be an online community, but find your people. Find the ones who get it, who won't collude with your victimhood, who won't let you stay stuck, who will lovingly, firmly remind you of your power when you forget. Because you will forget. We all forget. And having people around who remember, who reflect it back to you, that's invaluable. These 10 practices, if you do them consistently, will change your life. Not because they're magic, but because they build the capacity for responsibility. They rewire your brain. They create new defaults. They make taking responsibility more natural than blaming. And over time, you become someone different, someone who responds instead of reacts, someone who owns their life completely, someone who's free. Now, let me talk about what to do when it's really hard. Because it will be hard. There will be days when you don't want to do these practices, days when blame feels so much easier, days when you're convinced that taking responsibility is too much, too hard, not worth it, days when you want to give up and go back to the familiar comfort of making it someone else's fault. On those days, here's what you do. You don't try to be perfect. You don't beat yourself up for struggling. You just do one small thing. Just one. Maybe it's just the morning intention. Maybe it's just one pause during the day. Maybe it's just 2 minutes of mirror work. Just one small thing that keeps you connected to this path, that reminds you who you're choosing to be. Because the work isn't about being perfect. It's about being consistent. It's about showing up, even imperfectly, day after day after day. And on the really hard days, the days when you fall completely back into blame, when you spend hours in resentment, when you react from pain instead of responding from power, here's what you do. You forgive yourself. You practice compassion for yourself. You remember that change isn't linear. You remember that setbacks are part of the process. And then you start again. Tomorrow morning, you set your intention again. You don't let one bad day become a bad week. You don't let one reaction become a return to the old pattern. You just start again, fresh, new, committed, because that's the real practice. Not never falling, but always getting back up. Not never blaming, but catching yourself sooner each time and choosing differently. Not being perfect, but being persistent. That's what creates lasting change. Not one big moment of transformation, but 1,000 small choices to keep choosing power over victimhood, response over reaction, freedom over blame. Let me also give you some guidance on what to expect as you do this work. In the beginning, it's hard, really hard, because you're going against years, maybe decades, of conditioning. You're challenging beliefs you've held forever. You're letting go of identities that have felt like who you are. Your brain will resist. Your emotions will protest. Part of you will want to go back to the familiar pattern of blame because at least it's familiar. But if you push through this initial resistance, if you keep practicing even when it's hard, something starts to shift. You start to have moments of genuine freedom. Moments where you respond powerfully and you feel the difference. Where you don't take something personally that you would have before. Where you set a boundary and feel good about it. Where you feel lighter, freer, more yourself. And those moments, they're the fuel. They're what keeps you going. They're the evidence that this works, that it's worth it, that you're changing. And then, gradually, those moments become more frequent. The time between falling into blame and catching yourself gets shorter. The intensity of your reactions decreases. The peace you feel increases. And one day, you realize that responding powerfully is your new default. That taking responsibility is just what you do now. That you're not the same person you were. And that's everything.
How long does this take?
It depends on how deep your wounds are, on how long you've been practicing blame, on how committed you are to the practices, on how much support you have. But as a general guideline, if you practice consistently, most people start to notice significant shifts within a few months. And within a year or two, it's become integrated. It's just who they are. Not perfect, but genuinely different. Genuinely freer. And here's the beautiful thing, once you've done this work, once you've really integrated it, it becomes portable. It applies to everything. Not just the old wounds, but new difficulties. Not just big betrayals, but small annoyances. Not just other people, but life itself. You develop a fundamental orientation toward taking responsibility for your response to everything. And that orientation, that's freedom. That's peace. That's power. That's the life you've been wanting. Now, as we come toward the end of this journey together, I want to bring it all back to where we started. Remember the question I asked at the beginning? What if the person you need to free isn't them, but you? What if you've been carrying the key to your own prison this whole time? Well, now you know. Now you've seen. The key is responsibility. The key is taking full ownership of your response to everything that's ever happened to you. The key is making that one short move from victim to author, from blame to responsibility, from prison to freedom. And the door to that prison? It's been unlocked this whole time. You can walk out any moment you choose. Not after they apologize. Not after they change. Not after justice is served. Now, right now, you can decide, right now, in this moment, that you're done carrying what isn't yours, done waiting for someone else to set you free, done making your happiness contingent on their choices. You can decide, right now, to take full responsibility for your life from this moment forward. And in that decision, everything changes. I want you to feel this. Really feel this. You are not trapped. You never were. The bars of the prison were always just a story you were telling yourself. A story about how they had to change for you to be free. A story about how their wrong made you stuck. A story about how you were a victim of their choices. And that story felt true. It felt like reality. But it was never true. It was never reality. It was just a story. And you can choose a different story. The true story is this. You are powerful. You always have been. You have the capacity to respond to anything, to create meaning from pain, to build a beautiful life from broken pieces, to be happy despite unfair circumstances, to love despite being hurt, to trust despite being betrayed, to stay open despite being let down, not because you're naive, not because you're in denial, but because you've claimed your power, because you've taken full responsibility, because you've chosen freedom over righteousness. This is who you really are, not the wounded one, not the victim, not the person whose life is controlled by what other people did or didn't do, but the powerful one, the free one, the one who creates their life consciously, intentionally, powerfully, the one who responds instead of reacts, the one who owns their story completely. That's who you really are. And everything we've talked about today is just about removing the layers of blame and victimhood that have been covering up that truth. So here's my invitation to you. Here's the choice point. Right now, in this moment, you can decide. You can decide to stop blaming, to stop carrying, to stop waiting. You can decide to take full responsibility for your response to everything that's ever happened to you. You can decide to be free. And if you make that decision, if you really make it, everything changes. Not because your circumstances change, but because you change. Because you reclaim your power. Because you become the author of your story, instead of a character waiting for someone else to write your ending. And here's what I know you can do this. I know you can. Because every person I've told you about today, they did it. And they're not special. They're not superhuman. They're just ordinary people who made an extraordinary choice. The choice to take their power back. The choice to be responsible. The choice to be free. And if they could do it, so can you. So I'm asking you, will you? Will you make that choice? Will you take that one short move from victim to author? Will you put down the backpack? Will you stop waiting and start living? Will you claim your power, your freedom, your life? Not someday, today, right now. Because here's the truth, your life is waiting for you. The life you've always wanted, the person you've always known you could be, the freedom you've been searching for, it's all right here. Right on the other side of this one decision, this one shift, this one short move from "they did this to me" to "this happened, and I choose how I respond." That's all it takes. One decision, one shift, one short move. And everything changes. So make the decision. Make it now. Say it out loud if you can. I take full responsibility for my life. I take full responsibility for my response to everything that's ever happened to me. I choose to be free. I am the author of my story. I am not a victim. I am powerful. I am free. Say it. Mean it. Feel it. Let it be true. And then, starting tomorrow morning, start the practices. Set your intention. Practice the pause. Do the reframe. Set boundaries. Practice compassion. Find the gifts. Give yourself closure. Look in the mirror and claim yourself. Find your community. And day by day, moment by moment, choice by choice, become the person you've always been, underneath the blame, underneath the wounds, underneath the story of victimhood. Become free. This is possible for you. This is available to you. Not someday. Not after everything is fixed. Now. Today. Right now. You can be free. You can stop blaming. You can take your power back. You can live as the author of your story. You can create a life that's beautiful, meaningful, powerful, regardless of what anyone else has done. I believe in you. I believe you have this capacity. I believe you can make this shift, because I've seen it happen hundreds of times. I've watched people who were more stuck, more hurt, more justified in their blame than you probably are, and they made this shift. They chose responsibility. They chose freedom, and their lives transformed. Not because everything got easier, but because they got stronger. They got freer. They got more themselves, and that's what's waiting for you. Not a perfect life, not a pain-free life, but a free life, a powerful life, a life where you're the one making the choices, where you're the one determining your response, where you're the author, not a character, where you're the creator, not the victim. That's what's possible. That's what's available. That's what you can claim right now. So here we are. We've come full circle. We started with a question, what if the person you need to free is you? And now you know the answer. It is you. You're the one who needs freeing, and you're the one who can do it. Not them. You. With one decision, one shift, one short move. Will you make it? Will you choose freedom over blame? Will you choose power over victimhood? Will you choose to be the author of your story instead of waiting for someone else to write it? I hope you will. I hope you'll make that choice today. Not because I need you to, but because you deserve it. You deserve to be free. You deserve to be powerful. You deserve to live fully, openly, joyfully, regardless of what anyone has ever done to you. Your life is yours. It always has been. It's time to claim it. Fully, completely, powerfully, starting now. If this resonated with you, if this spoke to something deep inside you, make sure to subscribe for more transformational content. Hit like to support this work reaching more people who need it. And drop a comment sharing your own experience. Where are you in this journey? What wound are you ready to stop carrying? What blame are you ready to release? I'd love to hear from you, because we're in this together. All of us trying to be free. All of us choosing to take our power back. All of us making that one short move from victim to author. Thank you for being here. Thank you for doing this work. Thank you for choosing freedom. Your choice matters. Your growth matters. Your freedom matters. And I'm honored to have been part of this journey with you. Now go. Go live as the powerful, free, responsible author of your own story. Go create the life you've always wanted. Go be who you really are. Go stop blaming and start living. The world needs you free, and you deserve to be free. So go, be free.